What if the secret to unlimited wealth wasn't about working harder, but about thinking in a completely different way? And what if the richest man who ever lived had left a manual encoded in ancient teachings, waiting for you to finally understand its true message? Solomon was not just a king of gold and palaces. He was a master of consciousness, an architect of reality who understood the invisible laws that govern the manifestation of wealth. When he asked God for wisdom, he was not seeking intellectual knowledge. He was requesting access to the source code of creation, the exact frequency where prosperity and abundance are natural states of being. This audiobook reveals Solomon's secret plan, a complete system of mental and energetic reprogramming that transforms your relationship with money, prosperity, and your own sense of worth. You will discover that wealth was never about having more. It has always been about being more, about elevating your consciousness to the point where abundance flows naturally, like water descending a mountain. Solomon built his empire not through force, but through alignment. He understood that when your inner mind is in harmony with the universal laws of abundance, the external world has no choice but to reflect that reality. It is time for you to activate Solomon's plan within yourself. The wisdom has always been available. Wealth has always been yours by right of consciousness. Now you are about to claim it. Chapter 1. The secret Solomon discovered before asking for wealth. What if the wealthiest man who ever lived understood something about money that has nothing to do with money itself? What if his request for wisdom instead of riches wasn't humility, but the most strategic decision in human history? And what if that same understanding is available to you right now, waiting to transform your relationship with abundance forever? You've been taught that wealth comes from working harder, saving more, investing wisely, and making smart financial decisions. While these actions have their place, they're built on a foundation of complete misunderstanding about the true source of prosperity. Wealth doesn't flow from external manipulation of circumstances. It flows from an internal state of consciousness that makes abundance inevitable. Solomon knew this, and before he ever asked God for wisdom, something profound happened within him that changed everything. Let me take you back to that moment. A young king, barely out of his 20s, standing at the threshold of unlimited power. God appears to him in a dream and makes an offer that would make any modern person's heart race. Ask for whatever you want me to give you. Can you imagine that? The creator of the universe, the source of all abundance, offering you a blank check. What would you ask for? Be honest with yourself. Would wealth cross your mind? Would you think of vast riches, overflowing bank accounts, properties spanning continents? Most people would. And that's precisely why most people never experience the kind of abundance Solomon manifested. Because Solomon asked for something that seemed less valuable, but was infinitely more powerful. He asked for wisdom. Not wisdom in the intellectual sense, not knowledge or information, but something far deeper. He asked for the ability to discern, to perceive reality as it truly is, to understand the invisible laws that govern manifestation itself. He asked for access to the operating system of the universe. But here's what you need to understand. What changes everything? Solomon didn't just wake up one day and randomly decide wisdom was more valuable than gold. Something had already shifted in his consciousness before that divine encounter. He had already experienced a transformation in his state of being that allowed him to see what others couldn't see. He had transcended the ordinary human programming that equates survival with accumulation. He had discovered that consciousness itself is the only true currency in the universe. Think about this carefully. When you ask for money, you're operating from a consciousness of lack. You're saying, I don't have this, so I need it. That statement, That energetic signature, that vibrational frequency, is one of separation from abundance. You're defining yourself as someone without wealth, and the universe, which is nothing more than a mirror of your consciousness, reflects that definition back to you with precision. You get more of what you are, not what you want. This is the fundamental law that most people never grasp, spending their entire lives chasing abundance while broadcasting the frequency of scarcity. Solomon understood something revolutionary. He understood that if he became wise, if he aligned his consciousness with the laws that govern reality, wealth would not be something he pursued, but something that pursued him. He would become a magnet for abundance because his state of being would match the frequency of prosperity itself. This is not metaphor. This is quantum mechanics. This is neuroscience. This is how your brain and the universe actually work. Your brain doesn't know the difference between an experience that's happening in your external world and an experience you're vividly imagining internally. When you think a thought and feel an emotion, you're literally creating the chemical and electrical patterns in your brain and body that correspond to that reality. Your body doesn't know you're not actually wealthy when you feel abundant. It simply responds to the signals you're sending. And those signals, those electromagnetic broadcasts from your heart and brain, interact with the quantum field of infinite possibilities around you, collapsing potential into actual experience. Solomon knew this intuitively. Ancient wisdom traditions have known this for thousands of years. Modern science is finally catching up, revealing what mystics have always understood. Consciousness is the ground of all being. Everything you see, touch, and experience begins as information and energy in an invisible field. Your observations, your expectations, your beliefs, and most importantly, your state of being determines which possibilities materialize from that field into your life. Change your state of being, and you change what you attract, create, and become. So when Solomon asked for wisdom, he was actually asking for the master key. He was asking for the ability to consciously participate in creation rather than unconsciously react to circumstance. He was choosing to become a creator rather than remain a victim. And the moment he made that choice, everything changed, not just in his future, but in that very moment. Because in choosing wisdom, he was already demonstrating wisdom. He was already operating from a consciousness that had transcended the prison of lack. Now let me tell you what happened next, because this is where it gets extraordinary. God was so impressed with Solomon's request, so moved by the fact that this young king understood the hierarchy of reality, that he gave Solomon not just wisdom, but also the very wealth and honor he didn't ask for. God said, "Since you have asked for this and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings." Do you see what happened there? The moment Solomon stopped needing wealth, the moment he elevated his consciousness above the survival-based craving for material security, wealth became inevitable. It's like the universe was waiting for him to get out of his own way, to stop blocking the flow with desperate grasping, to simply open himself to receive what was always available. This is the paradox that frustrates the logical mind, but is absolutely fundamental to manifestation. You must become what you seek before you receive it. You must generate the feeling of abundance before abundance appears. You must embody wealth in your consciousness before it manifests in your bank account. This isn't spiritual bypassing or positive thinking platitudes. This is the mechanics of how reality operates. Your subconscious mind, which controls 95% of your daily thoughts, behaviors, and decisions, was programmed before you were 7 years old. During those early years, your brain waves were predominantly in theta, a highly suggestible state where you simply absorbed everything around you without critical analysis. If you grew up hearing, "Money doesn't grow on trees," "Rich people are greedy," "We can't afford that," or "Money is the root of all evil," those beliefs became embedded in your subconscious operating system. They became your truth, your reality, your identity. And here's the challenge. You can't outthink your subconscious with your conscious mind. You can set goals, create vision boards, and repeat affirmations until you're exhausted. But if your subconscious is running a program of scarcity, it will sabotage every conscious effort you make toward abundance. Your subconscious will find ways to prove itself right. It will create behaviors that push wealth away. It will generate emotions that don't match prosperity. It will maintain the familiar state, even if that state is poverty, because the subconscious values survival and familiarity above growth and expansion. Solomon's wisdom was the key that unlocked his subconscious. When you truly become wise, when you perceive reality clearly, you see these unconscious programs for what they are: outdated software that no longer serves you. You see that the beliefs you've been operating from aren't even yours. They're inherited, absorbed, and internalized from people who themselves didn't understand the true nature of abundance. And in that seeing, in that clear discernment, you gain the power to change the program. This is what makes Solomon's story so powerful and so immediately applicable to your life. He didn't have access to modern psychology or neuroscience, yet he understood intuitively what we now can prove scientifically, that your state of consciousness determines your reality. He understood that wisdom isn't accumulated knowledge. It's the ability to perceive truth and align yourself with it. And the deepest truth about wealth is this: it's not external, it's internal. It's a frequency, a vibration, a state of being that you either embody or you don't. When you embody the consciousness of abundance, several things happen simultaneously. First, your brain begins to perceive opportunities that were always there but invisible to a mind programmed for scarcity. Your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information and determines what gets your attention, starts looking for abundance instead of threats. You literally begin to see a different world, not because the world changed, but because you changed. Second, your emotional state shifts. Instead of operating from fear, anxiety, and lack, you begin to feel gratitude, possibility, and expectation. These emotions aren't just feelings. They're electromagnetic signals that your heart broadcasts up to 15 feet beyond your body, affecting the quantum field around you and drawing circumstances that match your emotional frequency. Third, and this is crucial, your behaviors change without effort. When you're in a state of abundance consciousness, you don't have to force yourself to take action. Action becomes natural, inspired, almost effortless. You find yourself making decisions that wealthy people make, not because you're trying to imitate them, but because you've become them. You've changed your identity at the deepest level, and your external behaviors simply reflect that internal transformation. This is what Solomon experienced. He didn't just receive wealth, he became wealth. His consciousness was so aligned with abundance that riches flowed to him from directions he couldn't have predicted or manipulated through strategy alone. There's a story about Solomon that illustrates this perfectly. When the Queen of Sheba heard about his wisdom and wealth, She traveled great distances to see if the rumors were true. When she arrived, she was overwhelmed not just by his riches, but by the consciousness from which they emanated. She said, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true. But I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth you have far exceeded the report I heard." She wasn't just impressed by gold and building. She was encountering a state of being so elevated, so aligned with truth, that abundance was its natural expression. This is your invitation, not to imitate Solomon's actions, but to activate Solomon's consciousness within yourself. To make the same fundamental choice he made, to value transformation of consciousness above accumulation of things. Because when your consciousness transforms, the things follow automatically. When you become abundant internally, you cannot help but create abundance externally. It's not effort, it's not struggle, it's alignment, it's frequency. It's the natural law of correspondence that has governed manifestation since the beginning of time. You might be wondering, how do I do this? How do I shift my consciousness when I'm surrounded by bills, debt, and financial pressure? How do I feel abundant when my bank account says otherwise? This is the question that stops most people. They look at their current circumstances and use those circumstances as evidence for how they should think and feel. But this is backwards. Your current circumstances are the result of your past consciousness. They're old news, yesterday's manifestation, the material reflection of who you used to be. If you continue to think and feel based on your current circumstances, you'll just keep creating more of the same. Solomon's wisdom teaches us to do the opposite, to think and feel from the future you intend to create, not from the past you're trying to escape, to generate the emotions of wealth before wealth appears, to make decisions from abundance, even when your bank account reflects lack. This requires courage. It requires faith. But more than anything, it requires understanding that you are not a physical being trying to become spiritual. You are consciousness having a temporary physical experience. And consciousness is the only true reality. Everything else is just consciousness made visible. When you sit in meditation, when you close your eyes and disconnect from your external environment, from your body, from time itself, you enter the quantum field where all possibilities exist. In that space, your dream of wealth exists as a real potential, as real as the poverty you've been experiencing. The question is, which potential will you energize with your attention and emotion? Which reality will you collapse from the field of infinite possibilities into your actual experience? This is not wishful thinking. This is quantum physics. The observer affects the observed. Your consciousness literally shapes reality. Solomon made this choice thousands of years ago, and it transformed him into the wealthiest man on earth, not because he manipulated markets or exploited people, but because he aligned himself with the laws of consciousness that govern all manifestation. He became a vibrational match for wealth. He embodied abundance, and the universe, which can only say yes to whatever frequency you're broadcasting, responded with a resounding affirmation of his state of being. This same choice is available to you right now, not tomorrow, not when circumstances change, not when you have more money, more time, or more resources. Right now, in this moment, you can decide to stop living from your past and start living from your future. You can choose wisdom over worry, alignment over anxiety, consciousness over circumstance, and in that choice, everything changes because you've just activated Solomon's secret. You've just accessed the same power he used to manifest wealth beyond measure. You've just remembered what you've always been. Consciousness itself, the creator of your reality, the architect of your experience, unlimited, infinite, and abundant by nature. The journey has begun. Solomon's plan is now your plan, and wealth, true wealth, is not something you'll chase anymore. It's something you'll become. Chapter 2. Reprogramming the Scarcity Code. Solomon's first law. There's a program running in your mind right now that's controlling your financial reality, and you didn't write it. It was installed before you could speak in complete sentences, before you understood what money was, before you had any conscious choice in the matter. And this program, this invisible code, embedded deep in your subconscious mind, is the reason your bank account looks the way it does today. Not your education, not your work ethic, not the economy. Your subconscious programming is the master controller of your wealth, and until you rewrite that code, everything else you try will be like rearranging furniture in a burning house. Solomon understood this fundamental principle before modern neuroscience could prove it. He knew that wisdom wasn't just about making smart decisions with your conscious mind. True wisdom meant gaining access to the subconscious programs that were actually running your life, recognizing which ones were serving you and which ones were sabotaging you, and having the power to rewrite the code entirely. This was his first law of wealth. You cannot create abundance from a consciousness of scarcity. You must reprogram the operating system itself. Let me take you back to your childhood, back to those crucial years between birth and age 7. During this time, your brain was predominantly in theta and delta wave states, the same brainwave frequencies you experience during deep meditation and sleep. In these states, your mind was like a sponge, absorbing everything around you without any critical faculty to filter or question what was being absorbed. You were in a state of pure reception, downloading the beliefs, attitudes, and emotional patterns of everyone around you, particularly your parents and primary caregivers. This wasn't learning in the traditional sense. This was programming, direct installation of software into your subconscious hard drive. Every time your mother said, "Money doesn't grow on trees," that became code. Every time your father came home stressed about bills, your nervous system recorded that wealth equals anxiety. Every time you heard, "We can't afford that," your brain created neural pathways associating desire with disappointment. If you grew up in a household where money was scarce, fought about, or associated with negative emotions, your subconscious learned that money is scarce, that having it causes conflict, and that wanting it leads to pain. These weren't conscious decisions you made. They were automatic downloads happening at a neurological level, creating the foundational operating system for your financial life. Here's what makes this so insidious. By the time you're 7 years old, your subconscious programming is essentially complete. The beliefs about money, about your worthiness to receive it, about what's possible for someone like you, are already firmly established. And then you spend the rest of your life living from that programming, completely unaware that it's even there. You think your thoughts are your own. You think your reactions are natural. You think your financial limitations are just reality. But they're not. They're old programs running on autopilot, creating the same results over and over again, no matter how hard you work, or how much you consciously want things to change. Studies show that 95% of your daily thoughts, behaviors, and decisions are controlled by your subconscious mind. That means only 5% of your life is actually being directed by your conscious desires and intention. Can you see the problem? You can set all the goals you want with that 5%. But if the other 95% is programmed for scarcity, you're trying to drive forward with the emergency brake engaged. You're fighting against yourself, and the subconscious always wins because it's faster, stronger, and doesn't require conscious effort. It's automatic. It's who you've become. Solomon didn't have the language of neuroscience, but he had the wisdom to perceive this truth. He understood that most people were living in a prison of inherited beliefs, that they were poor not because of external circumstances, but because of internal programming. And he knew that the key to wealth wasn't just accumulating more gold. It was transforming the consciousness that interacted with gold. He knew that until you change your relationship with abundance at the subconscious level, you'll keep creating the same financial reality no matter what you do with your conscious mind. Think about how this plays out in real life. You decide you want to be wealthy. You set a goal, maybe even write it down. You feel excited, motivated, ready to take action. And then, mysteriously, things start happening. You self-sabotage. You procrastinate on the important tasks. You make decisions that move you away from wealth rather than toward it. Or maybe you do succeed temporarily. You make some money, and then you unconsciously find a way to lose it. Business fails. Unexpected expenses appear. You make a poor investment. It's like there's an invisible force keeping you at a certain financial set point. And no matter what you consciously try to do, you keep returning to that baseline. That invisible force is your subconscious programming. It has a set point for how much money you're allowed to have, how much success you're allowed to experience, how much abundance you're allowed to receive. This set point was established in childhood based on what you observed and absorbed, and your subconscious will do whatever it takes to maintain that set point, because the subconscious values familiarity and survival above growth and expansion. It doesn't matter if your familiar state is poverty and struggle. To your subconscious, familiar equals safe. Change, even positive change, registers as threat. So it protects you from the danger of wealth by sabotaging your conscious efforts to create it. This is why positive thinking alone doesn't work. This is why affirmations often fail. This is why vision boards sit on your wall while your bank account stays the same. You're trying to communicate with your subconscious in a language it doesn't understand. Your conscious mind speaks in words and logic. Your subconscious speaks in emotion, repetition, and experience. It doesn't care what you say you want. It only responds to what you feel and what you repeatedly demonstrate through your state of being. Solomon's wisdom revealed the solution. You must reprogram your subconscious the same way it was originally programmed, through emotion and repetition. You must create new neural pathways, new associations, new beliefs that become so automatic, so ingrained, that they replace the old programming entirely. This isn't done through intellectual understanding. You can know consciously that you deserve wealth, but if your subconscious doesn't believe it, knowledge changes nothing. Reprogramming happens when you repeatedly place yourself in an elevated emotional state, while simultaneously holding the vision of your abundant future, until the feeling and the vision become neurologically linked. Let me show you how this works in your brain. Every time you have a thought, you create a chemical response in your body. Think about a stressful bill, and your body releases cortisol and adrenaline. Think about receiving money, and if your subconscious associates money with anxiety, you'll still release stress chemicals even though you're thinking about receiving. Your body has been conditioned to respond to certain thoughts with certain emotions, and those emotions then trigger certain thoughts, creating a loop. This is called a neuronet, a cluster of neurons that fire together automatically. The more you repeat this pattern, the stronger the neural pathway becomes, until it's so established that it fires without any conscious input from you. This is how your scarcity program operates. Thought triggers emotion, emotion triggers thought, and the loop runs continuously in the background of your awareness, broadcasting a frequency of lack into the quantum field around you. And the field, being impartial and responsive, simply reflects back circumstances that match your broadcast. You're not attracting what you want. You're attracting what you are. This is the law Solomon understood completely. Change what you are. Change what you attract. Transform your internal state. Transform your external reality. But here's the encouraging truth that Solomon's wisdom reveals. Just as you were programmed for scarcity, you can be reprogrammed for abundance. Neural pathways can be weakened, and new ones can be strengthened. Your brain is neuroplastic, meaning it can change throughout your entire life, based on what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. The old scarcity program doesn't have to run forever. You have the power to interrupt it, weaken it, and eventually replace it with a new program, one that serves your highest vision of prosperity. The process begins with awareness. You can't change what you can't see. You must become conscious of your unconscious pattern. When do you feel anxiety about money? What thoughts automatically arise when you check your bank account? What stories do you tell yourself about why you can't be wealthy? What beliefs about rich people did you inherit from your parents? These questions aren't comfortable, but they're necessary. You're excavating the code, bringing the subconscious program into conscious awareness, where you can examine it, question it, and ultimately reject it. I want you to understand something crucial. Those beliefs you discovered aren't truth. They're just programs. They're not facts about reality. They're interpretations that were installed in your mind before you could choose otherwise. Money is hard to get isn't a universal law. It's a belief. Rich people are greedy isn't objective truth. It's a judgment that someone else made and you downloaded. I'm not good with money isn't your identity. It's a program running in your system, and programs can be deleted and rewritten. Solomon demonstrated this when he chose wisdom. In that choice, he was essentially rejecting the collective programming of his culture that said power comes from military might and accumulated wealth. He was choosing a different operating system entirely, one based on alignment with universal truth rather than manipulation of external circumstances. And that choice changed everything, because it interrupted the old pattern and established a new one. He literally rewired his consciousness in that moment, and everything that followed was a result of that new programming. You have this same power right now, not someday when you're more spiritual or more evolved or more worthy. Right now, in this moment, you can make the choice to reject the scarcity program and install a new one. But you must understand that this choice isn't made once and then forgotten. This choice must be made repeatedly, consistently, with emotional intensity, until the new program becomes as automatic as the old one. This is the work. This is the reprogramming process. This is Solomon's first law in action. Here's how it works practically. You must create a new association between money and positive emotion. Every time you think about wealth, you must intentionally generate feelings of joy, gratitude, freedom, and excitement. Not someday when you have the money, but right now, before the money appears. This feels counterintuitive because you've been programmed to believe that circumstances create emotions. You think you'll feel grateful when you're wealthy, but this is backwards. You must feel grateful to become wealthy. The emotion comes first. The emotion is the signal that tells your subconscious and the quantum field what to create. This is why Solomon could rule with such wisdom and attract such wealth. His emotional state wasn't dependent on external circumstances. He generated elevated emotions from within, from his connection to divine consciousness, and those emotions magnetized corresponding external experiences. He understood that he wasn't a victim of circumstance, but a creator of circumstance through his state of being. This is mastery. This is the consciousness that creates kingdoms. You might be thinking, but how do I feel abundant when I'm surrounded by lack? How do I feel grateful when I have bills I can't pay? This is the challenge, and this is where most people give up. They wait for circumstances to change before they change their internal state. But this keeps them locked in the old program forever. You must be willing to feel the emotion before you see the evidence. You must train yourself to generate abundance consciousness regardless of what your bank account shows. This is faith in action. This is choosing the future over the past. This is reprogramming. Your subconscious learns through repetition and emotion. So you must repeatedly place yourself in the emotional state of abundance with such intensity that it begins to overwrite the old scarcity program. When you wake up in the morning, before you check your phone, before you engage with the stress of your day, spend time in meditation generating the feeling of wealth. Feel what it would feel like to check your bank account and see abundance. Feel the relief, the freedom, the joy, the gratitude. Make it so real in your body that your subconscious can't tell the difference between imagination and reality. This is neurologically installing new software. Every time you do this practice, you're weakening the old neural pathways of scarcity and strengthening new neural pathways of abundance. The old program says, money is scarce and hard to get. The new program says, money flows to me easily and abundantly. But you can't just think the new thought. You must feel it in every cell of your body. You must embody it. You must become it. This is how Solomon operated. He didn't just know wisdom intellectually. He embodied it. He became wisdom, and wealth was the natural expression of that state of being. There's a phenomenon in neuroscience called Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together, wire together. When you repeatedly pair the thought of wealth with elevated emotions, you're creating a new neural network. Over time, with consistent practice, this new network becomes stronger than the old one. Eventually, thinking about money automatically triggers feelings of abundance rather than anxiety. You've successfully reprogrammed your subconscious. The old code has been overwritten. The new operating system is running. And from this new program, new results must emerge. But you must be patient with yourself. You're undoing years, possibly decades, of conditioning. The scarcity program has had a long time to establish itself. It won't disappear overnight just because you decide you want it gone. This is a practice, a daily commitment to choosing differently until the new choice becomes automatic. Solomon's wisdom wasn't instant. It was cultivated. He sought understanding with his whole heart. He made it his priority. He invested time and energy into aligning his consciousness with truth, and you must do the same. Every time you catch yourself in scarcity thinking, pause. Don't judge yourself. Just notice. This is the old program running. You're becoming aware of it, which means you're no longer completely identified with it. And in that gap between stimulus and response, in that moment of awareness, you have choice. You can let the old program continue, or you can consciously interrupt it and choose a different thought, a different feeling, a different response. Choose abundance. Choose possibility. Choose faith in your ability to create. This interruption, repeated hundreds of times, is what weakens the old neural pathway and establishes the new one. Understand that your subconscious is always listening. It's recording every thought you think and every emotion you feel, using that information to confirm what it already believes about reality. If you consistently think thoughts of lack and feel emotions of scarcity, you're reinforcing the old program. But if you consistently think thoughts of abundance and feel emotions of prosperity, you're installing new code. Your subconscious doesn't judge whether these thoughts and feelings are realistic based on current circumstances. It simply accepts them as data and works to create a reality that matches. This is why Solomon could speak with such authority about the power of the tongue and the heart. He said in Proverbs, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." Not as a man thinks in his mind, but in his heart. The heart is the seat of emotion. He understood that what you feel with emotional intensity becomes your reality. He knew that the subconscious speaks the language of feeling, not logic. So he guarded his emotional state carefully, ensuring that he felt from his desired future rather than his present circumstances. You must become just as vigilant. Your emotional state is creating your financial reality moment by moment. When you feel poor, you are poor in consciousness, and poverty in consciousness must eventually manifest as poverty in circumstance. When you feel abundant, you are abundant in consciousness, and abundance in consciousness must eventually manifest as abundance in circumstance. There's no exception to this law. It's as reliable as gravity. Solomon knew it. Now you know it. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? The reprogramming process requires you to become a different person, not just someone who thinks different thoughts, but someone who feels different emotions, takes different actions, and ultimately embodies a different identity. You must stop being the person who struggles with money and become the person who flows with abundance. This transformation happens in your subconscious first, then it manifests in your life. Solomon didn't become wealthy and then wise. He became wise, and wealth was the inevitable result of that consciousness. You're not trying to get wealth. You're becoming wealth. You're not trying to attract abundance. You're becoming abundance. This is the shift Solomon made, and this is the shift available to you. But it requires complete commitment. You can't reprogram your subconscious halfway. You can't be abundant in consciousness on Monday and poor in consciousness on Tuesday and expect consistent results. You must choose your new identity and stay committed to it even when circumstances haven't caught up yet, even when your bank account still shows lack, even when other people question what you're doing. Your consistency is what creates the new program. This is Solomon's first law. Reprogram the scarcity code. Identify the old beliefs that aren't serving you. Reject them consciously. Install new beliefs through emotional repetition. Become so consistent in your new state of being that your subconscious has no choice but to accept it as your new identity. And then watch as your external world begins to reorganize itself around your internal transformation. The money will come, the opportunities will appear, the abundance will flow. Not because you manipulated anything externally, but because you transformed everything internally. You rewrote the code, and the code determines everything. Chapter 3. The frequency of prosperity, vibrating at Solomon's wavelength. Everything in the universe is energy vibrating at different frequencies. Your body is energy. Your thoughts are energy. Money is energy. And right now, you're broadcasting a specific frequency into the quantum field around you, a frequency that determines exactly what you attract, create, and experience in your financial life. This isn't metaphor or mysticism. This is physics. This is how reality actually works. And Solomon, thousands of years before modern science could measure it, understood this principle completely. He knew how to tune himself to the frequency of prosperity and maintain that vibration so consistently that wealth had no choice but to materialize in his life. When you look at your bank account and feel disappointment, you're vibrating at the frequency of lack. When you worry about bills, you're vibrating at the frequency of scarcity. When you envy someone else's success, you're vibrating at the frequency of separation from abundance. And the universe, which is nothing more than a responsive field of infinite potential, matches your frequency with absolute precision. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you are. Your vibration is your point of attraction, and until you change your frequency, nothing in your external world can fundamentally change. Let me explain what's actually happening energetically when you think and feel. Your brain is an electrochemical organ that produces measurable electromagnetic fields. Every thought you think creates an electrical signal that travels through your neural networks. Every emotion you feel generates a magnetic field that radiates from your heart. In fact, the electromagnetic field produced by your heart is 5,000 times stronger than the field produced by your brain, and it extends up to 15 feet beyond your physical body. This isn't spiritual theory. This is measurable science. You are literally broadcasting energy into the space around you every single moment. And that broadcast is either aligned with abundance or aligned with scarcity. When Solomon ruled his kingdom, he wasn't just making wise decisions with his intellect. He was operating from an elevated state of being that generated a specific electromagnetic signature, a frequency that resonated with prosperity. Ancient texts describe him as having a presence, an energy that people could feel when they were near him. The Queen of Sheba traveled vast distances not just to see his wealth, but to experience his consciousness. She wanted to understand what frequency he was vibrating at that made such abundance inevitable, and when she encountered him, she was overwhelmed because she could feel the coherence, the alignment, the elevated state that emanated from his being. This is what you need to understand. Frequency isn't something you do. It's something you are. It's your state of being translated into energetic vibration. When you're in a state of fear, you vibrate at approximately 100 hertz. When you're in a state of anger, you vibrate around 150 hertz. But when you're in states of love, gratitude, and joy, you vibrate at 500 hertz and above. Abundance exists at these higher frequencies. Prosperity consciousness operates at these elevated wavelengths. Solomon lived in these states so consistently that his very presence was magnetizing. People, opportunities, and wealth were drawn to him, not because he chased them, but because his frequency naturally attracted them. Most people are trying to create wealth while vibrating at the frequency of poverty. They're taking action, working hard, making plans, but their underlying emotional state is one of lack, fear, and scarcity. This creates what's called incoherence, where your thoughts say one thing, but your emotions broadcast something completely different. Your conscious mind might be saying, "I want wealth," but if your subconscious is generating feelings of unworthiness, anxiety, and limitation, those feelings are the frequency you're actually transmitting. And the universe doesn't respond to your words or your wishes. It responds to your vibration. Think of it like a radio. Your favorite station is always broadcasting, always available, but you'll only hear it if you tune your radio to that specific frequency. If you want to hear 98.5 FM, but your dial is set to 101.3, you won't receive the signal no matter how much you want to. The station is there, the music is playing, but you're not aligned with its frequency. Wealth is the same way. Abundance is always available in the quantum field. Infinite possibilities for prosperity exist right now, but you'll only experience them if your personal frequency matches the frequency where they exist. Change your frequency, and you change what you receive. Solomon's wisdom was understanding that he had complete control over his frequency. He wasn't a victim of his emotional state. He was the conscious creator of it. He knew that circumstances don't determine feelings. Consciousness determines feelings, and feelings determine frequency, and frequency determines reality. So he made it his practice to maintain elevated emotional states regardless of what was happening around him. He understood that his inner world created his outer world, not the other way around. This is mastery. This is the secret that most people never discover, spending their entire lives as emotional reactors instead of emotional creators. Your heart is the key to this transformation. Research in neurocardiology has revealed that your heart has its own nervous system, a heart-brain with over 40,000 neurons that can sense, process, and make decisions independent of your cranial brain. Your heart generates a powerful electromagnetic field that affects every cell in your body and influences the people and environment around you. When your heart is in a state of coherence, when you're feeling elevated emotions like gratitude, love, and joy, you produce a smooth, harmonious heart rhythm pattern. This coherent state has been scientifically proven to enhance cognitive function, improve decision-making, and increase your ability to perceive opportunities that were previously invisible to you. But when you're in stress, fear, or frustration, your heart rhythm becomes erratic and incoherent. This incoherent state literally disrupts the communication between your heart and brain, impairs your ability to think clearly, and broadcasts a chaotic signal into the field around. You become a magnet for more chaos, more problems, more scarcity. This is why people who are stressed about money tend to experience more financial problems. Their incoherent state attracts circumstances that match their internal chaos. They're creating from a frequency of disorder, so they experience disorder in their lives. Solomon maintained heart coherence. His wisdom allowed him to stay centered in elevated emotional states, even when facing challenges. He didn't allow external circumstances to dictate his internal state, because he understood that his internal state was creating those circumstances. When you give your power away to external conditions, when you say, "I'll feel abundant when I have money," you've just guaranteed that you'll never have money because you're waiting for circumstances to change your frequency. But it works the opposite way. Change your frequency first, then circumstances must reorganize themselves to match. This is the quantum principle that ancient wisdom traditions knew intuitively, and that modern physics has now confirmed. The observer affects the observed. Your consciousness collapses possibilities from the quantum field into actual experiences. When you observe from a frequency of lack, you collapse lack into your reality. When you observe from a frequency of abundance, you collapse abundance into your reality. The field doesn't have preferences. It simply responds to whatever signal you're broadcasting. Solomon understood this completely, and he used this knowledge to become the wealthiest man of his era. You must become aware of what frequency you're broadcasting moment to moment. Most people are completely unconscious of their emotional state, reacting automatically to whatever happens around them. Someone cuts them off in traffic, and they vibrate at the frequency of anger. They check their bank account, and they vibrate at the frequency of anxiety. They see someone else's success, and they vibrate at the frequency of envy or inadequacy. And they wonder why their financial situation never changes. It never changes because they're broadcasting the same frequency day after day, year after year, creating the same results over and over again. To shift your frequency, you must become intentional about your emotional state. You must practice generating elevated emotions independent of circumstances. This is the discipline that Solomon mastered. Every morning before engaging with his kingdom, before making any decisions, he would align himself with divine consciousness, entering states of profound peace, gratitude, and joy. These weren't just pleasant feelings. They were strategic frequencies that aligned him with the wisdom and abundance he needed to rule effectively. He understood that he couldn't serve his people from a state of stress or fear. He had to elevate his frequency first, then everything else would follow. Let me teach you the practice of frequency elevation that transforms your point of attraction. Find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed. Close your eyes and bring your attention to your heart center, the area in the middle of your chest. Take slow, deep breaths, imagining that you're breathing in and out through your heart. As you breathe, begin to generate feelings of gratitude. Think of something or someone you genuinely appreciate, something that makes your heart feel full. It doesn't have to be related to money. It can be a person you love, a beautiful sunset you witnessed, a moment when you felt truly alive. The content doesn't matter as much as the feeling you generate. As you breathe and feel gratitude, notice how your body begins to relax. Your heart rhythm is becoming more coherent. Your electromagnetic field is shifting from chaos to harmony. You're literally changing your frequency. Stay with this feeling for several minutes, allowing it to build and intensify. Feel the warmth in your chest. Feel the expansion. Feel the peace. This is your natural state, when you're not contracted by fear and stress. This is the frequency where miracles happen, where abundance flows, where opportunities appear. This is Solomon's wavelength. Now, from this elevated state, begin to imagine your financial future. But don't imagine it from lack. Don't think about all the bills you need to pay or the debt you need to clear. Those thoughts will drop your frequency immediately. Instead, imagine what it feels like to check your bank account and see abundance. Imagine what it feels like to make purchases without anxiety. Imagine what it feels like to be generous, to give freely, to know that money flows to you easily. And most importantly, feel these imagined scenarios as if they're happening right now. Make them so real emotionally that your body begins to believe you're already living in that reality. This is how you reprogram your electromagnetic signature. Your body doesn't know the difference between an experience that's happening in your external environment and an experience you're creating internally with elevated emotion. When you feel wealthy, your body produces the same chemicals, the same hormones, the same electromagnetic field as if you were actually wealthy. And when you do this practice consistently, when you train your body to vibrate at the frequency of abundance day after day, you begin to literally restructure your biology to match prosperity. You're no longer the same person vibrationally. You've transformed your energetic signature, and your reality must eventually reflect that transformation. Solomon did this naturally because his consciousness was so aligned with divine truth. He didn't have to practice entering elevated states. He lived from them. But for most of us, this is a skill that must be developed through consistent practice. We've spent years training ourselves to react to circumstance, to let external conditions determine our frequency. Now we must retrain ourselves to be the conscious creators of our frequency, regardless of circumstance. This is the work. This is the practice. This is what changes everything. The scientific evidence for this is overwhelming. Studies on heart coherence have shown that when you practice generating elevated emotions, you produce DHEA, the vitality hormone that promotes health and longevity, while decreasing cortisol, the stress hormone that breaks down your body. You enhance the function of your immune system. You increase your brain's capacity for creativity and problem-solving. But most importantly for wealth creation, you shift from survival mode into creation mode. When you're in survival, your brain is focused on protecting you from threats, and it perceives any change as potentially dangerous. But when you're in elevated emotional states, your brain opens to possibility, perceives opportunities, and draws resources toward you rather than pushing them away. This is why stressed people make poor financial decisions. Their frequency is one of survival, so their brain is in protection mode, scanning for threats, expecting problems. They might see an opportunity, but their survival-based frequency makes them suspicious, doubtful, afraid. They talk themselves out of it. They focus on everything that could go wrong. They choose safety over growth. And they stay stuck in the same financial reality forever, wondering why nothing changes. Nothing changes because their frequency hasn't changed. They're still broadcasting lack, fear, and limitation, so that's exactly what they keep experiencing. Contrast this with Solomon. His frequency was so elevated, so aligned with abundance, that when opportunities appeared, he could perceive them clearly and act decisively. His elevated state gave him access to intuitive guidance that others couldn't hear. He could sense the right path forward because his frequency was coherent, organized, receptive. He wasn't clouded by fear or distracted by anxiety. He was tuned to the channel where divine wisdom broadcasts, and from that frequency, he made choices that consistently created more wealth, more wisdom, more abundance. You have access to this same channel right now. The frequency of prosperity isn't something reserved for special people or spiritual masters. It's your natural state when you're not contracted by limiting emotions. Every human being has the capacity to generate elevated emotional states. Every person can practice heart coherence. Every individual can choose to vibrate at higher frequencies. The question is, will you do the work required to maintain that frequency? Or will you continue to be a reactor, letting circumstances control your emotional state and therefore your reality? Understand that you're not trying to force anything to happen. You're not manipulating the universe or pushing energy around. You're simply aligning yourself with the frequency where abundance already exists. Prosperity is always available. Wealth is always present in the quantum field of potential, but you must match its frequency to experience it. This is the law. Solomon didn't create wealth. He aligned with it. He tuned himself to the frequency where it existed, and it manifested in his reality naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. There's another crucial aspect of frequency that you must understand: consistency. You can't vibrate at the frequency of abundance for 10 minutes during meditation and then spend the rest of your day vibrating at the frequency of lack and expect wealth to appear. Your predominant frequency is what matters. If you spend 2% of your time feeling abundant and 98% feeling poor, you're broadcasting poverty as your predominant signal. The field responds to your consistent habitual frequency, not your occasional elevated moment. This is why Solomon's wealth was so vast and enduring. He didn't just visit the frequency of prosperity occasionally. He lived there. It was his baseline state, his default mode, his consistent vibration. He trained himself to return to elevated emotions quickly when challenges arose. He didn't allow temporary circumstances to knock him out of alignment for days or weeks. He recalibrated immediately, returning to the frequency of wisdom and abundance that was his true nature. This is the practice you must develop, not perfection in maintaining high frequency every single moment, but speed in returning to it when you've temporarily lost it. Every time you catch yourself in a low-frequency state, worrying about money, feeling anxious about bills, resenting your current situation, you have a choice. You can stay in that frequency and continue creating more of the same. Or you can consciously shift. Take a few deep breaths, place your hand on your heart, generate feelings of gratitude for anything, even if it's just the breath in your lung. This simple practice can shift your electromagnetic signature in seconds. You're not denying your circumstances. You're refusing to let circumstances determine your frequency. This is power. This is mastery. This is what Solomon demonstrated. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes. Your body learns that it can feel abundant, even when the bank account says otherwise. Your nervous system discovers that safety doesn't come from external circumstances, but from internal alignment. Your heart begins to default to coherence rather than chaos. You literally rewire your biology to vibrate at prosperity consciousness as your natural state. And when that happens, when higher frequency becomes your automatic baseline, your entire life reorganizes itself around that new vibration. The money comes, the opportunities appear, the abundance flows, not because you made it happen, but because you became the frequency that allows it to happen. Solomon's frequency was so powerful, so coherent, so consistently elevated that even other kings could feel it when they encountered him. His reputation spread across nations not just because of his wealth, but because of the consciousness he embodied. People were drawn to him energetically. They wanted to be in his presence because his frequency lifted theirs. This is the ultimate power of elevated vibration. It doesn't just transform your own life. It influences everyone around you. When you master your frequency, you become a blessing to others, raising the collective vibration wherever you go. This is your invitation. Become a master of your frequency. Stop being a victim of emotional reaction. Stop letting circumstances determine your vibration. Start choosing elevated states intentionally, repeatedly, consistently, until they become your new normal. Practice heart coherence daily. Generate gratitude, love, and joy regardless of what your current reality looks like. Tune yourself to Solomon's wavelength, the frequency where wisdom and wealth naturally coexist. And then watch as your external world begins to match your internal transformation. The frequency of prosperity is calling you. Will you answer? Chapter 4. Wisdom is not knowledge. It is state of being. There's a profound difference between knowing something and being something, between accumulating information and embodying wisdom. You can read 1,000 books about wealth and still be poor. You can study financial strategies until you're an expert and still struggle to pay your bills, because knowledge without transformation is just entertainment. It fills your mind but doesn't change your reality. Solomon didn't become the wisest and wealthiest man on earth because he collected information. He became that man because he transformed his state of being so completely that wisdom wasn't something he had, it was something he was. And from that state of being, wealth wasn't something he pursued, it was something that naturally expressed through him. When Solomon asked God for wisdom, he wasn't requesting a download of facts or strategies. He was asking for a transformation of consciousness, a fundamental shift in how he perceived and interacted with reality. He was asking to become a different kind of being, one who could perceive truth directly, who could access divine intelligence in real time, who could make decisions not from the limited perspective of the human intellect, but from the infinite perspective of universal consciousness. This is what wisdom actually is. It's the ability to perceive and align with truth at such a deep level that right action becomes automatic, effortless, natural. Think about what this means practically. Most people make decisions about money from their thinking mind, analyzing pros and cons, weighing options, trying to predict outcomes based on limited information, and they stress themselves into exhaustion because the thinking mind, brilliant as it is, simply doesn't have access to all the variables. It can't see the future. It can't perceive the invisible connections between events. It operates in a narrow bandwidth of awareness, processing information sequentially, logically, but ultimately incompletely. This is why intelligent people often make poor financial decisions. They're relying on knowledge when what they need is wisdom. Wisdom operates from a completely different place. It doesn't come from the analytical mind trying to figure everything out. It comes from a deeper intelligence, what some call intuition, what others call divine guidance, what quantum physics might describe as coherence with the unified field. When you're in a state of wisdom, you don't have to analyze every option because you can sense the right path. You feel it. You know it with a certainty that transcends logic. Solomon had this capacity developed to an extraordinary degree. People traveled from distant lands to ask him questions not because he had studied their problems, but because he could perceive truth directly and speak it clearly. This is the state you must cultivate if you want to create lasting wealth. You must move beyond intellectual knowledge about money and develop an embodied wisdom about prosperity. You must become someone who doesn't just understand abundance conceptually, but who perceives it, feels it, expresses it naturally through their being. This is a fundamental shift in identity, a transformation so complete that your relationship with money changes at the cellular level. You're no longer someone who studies wealth. You become someone who is wealth. And from that state of being, creating financial abundance is as natural as breathing. Let me show you what happens in your brain and body when you make this shift. Your conscious thinking mind processes about 40 bits of information per second. That sounds impressive, until you realize that your subconscious mind processes 11 million bits of information per second. The vast majority of reality is being perceived and processed below your conscious awareness. When you rely solely on your thinking mind to make financial decisions, you're using less than 1% of your processing capacity. You're trying to navigate life with one eye closed and one hand tied behind your back. But when you develop wisdom, when you learn to access the deeper intelligence of your subconscious and the intuitive guidance of your heart, you tap into that 11 million bits per second. You suddenly have access to information and insights that your conscious mind couldn't possibly compute. Solomon's wisdom was his ability to access this deeper intelligence consistently. He didn't try to figure everything out with his intellect. He aligned himself with divine consciousness and allowed truth to reveal itself through him. This is why his judgments were so legendary, his decisions so brilliant, his reign so prosperous. He wasn't operating from the limited bandwidth of human reasoning. He was channeling infinite intelligence, and that intelligence knew things his conscious mind never could. It could see patterns invisible to ordinary perception. It could perceive the future implications of present choices. It could navigate complexity with an ease that seemed miraculous to those observing from the outside. You have access to this same intelligence right now. It's not reserved for biblical kings or spiritual masters. Every human being has a direct connection to infinite wisdom. Most people just don't know how to access it because they've been trained to trust only their thinking mind. They've been taught that logic is superior to intuition, that analysis is more reliable than feeling, that wisdom comes from accumulating knowledge rather than from transforming consciousness. And so, they live cut off from their deepest source of guidance, trying to create wealth with only their conscious mind, while the vast intelligence of their being remains untapped. The transformation from knowledge to wisdom begins when you learn to quiet your thinking mind and listen to the deeper knowing within. This isn't about rejecting intelligence or abandoning reason. It's about recognizing that your analytical mind is a tool, not your identity. It's useful for certain tasks, but it's not designed to be the CEO of your life. When you try to think your way through every decision, when you analyze everything to death, when you need to understand every detail before taking action, you're actually blocking the flow of wisdom. You're like someone standing in front of a waterfall with a thimble, trying to collect water drop by drop, when you could simply step into the stream and be immersed in abundance. Solomon knew how to step into the stream. He practiced entering states of consciousness where his thinking mind became quiet and his deeper intelligence could emerge. In those states, he received insights that transformed kingdoms, solved problems that seemed impossible, and made decisions that created prosperity for generations. This wasn't magic. This was mastery of consciousness. This was understanding that wisdom is a state of being you enter, not information you accumulate. And you can develop this same capacity through practice. The practice begins with meditation, but not meditation as most people understand it. You're not trying to stop thoughts or empty your mind completely. You're learning to shift your brain waves from beta, the active thinking state, into alpha and theta, the states where intuitive wisdom becomes accessible. When your brain is in beta, dominated by the conscious thinking mind, you're cut off from deeper intelligence. But when you slow your brain waves through meditation, breathwork, or other practices, you open the door to the subconscious and to the quantum field of infinite information. This is where Solomon dwelled. This is the state from which true wisdom flows. Imagine sitting in meditation, your breath slow and deep, your body relaxed, your mind beginning to quiet. As your brain waves slow, you start to feel a shift. The constant chatter of your thinking mind fades into the background. You become aware of a deeper presence, a stillness that holds infinite intelligence. In this state, you're no longer trying to figure things out. You're simply open, receptive, available to receive guidance. And into this open space, insights begin to flow, not as thoughts you're thinking, but as knowings that arise from somewhere deeper. This is wisdom speaking. This is the voice Solomon learned to hear and trust above all others. When you practice this consistently, when you make it a daily discipline to enter these deeper states of consciousness, something remarkable happens. You begin to receive guidance about your finances that your thinking mind never would have discovered. You might suddenly know that you should call a certain person, invest in a particular opportunity, or avoid a deal that looked good on paper but feels wrong energetically. These intuitive hits aren't random. They're coming from your connection to infinite intelligence, which can see what your limited conscious awareness cannot. Solomon made decisions from this place constantly, and his track record of success was legendary because he was tapping into a source of information far superior to human reasoning alone. But here's what's crucial to understand. This wisdom doesn't just give you information, it transforms you. Every time you access this deeper intelligence, every time you trust the guidance that comes from beyond your thinking mind, you're reinforcing a new neural pathway. You're teaching your brain that wisdom is available, that you can rely on it, that it's actually more trustworthy than your analytical mind when it comes to navigating the complexity of life and wealth creation. Over time, accessing wisdom becomes easier, more natural, more automatic. It shifts from something you do occasionally in meditation to something that's always available, a constant stream of guidance that you can tap into at any moment. This is what it means for wisdom to become your state of being. You're no longer someone who sometimes has insights. You're someone who lives in constant connection to infinite intelligence. You're no longer trying to figure everything out with your limited human mind. You're allowing divine wisdom to flow through you and guide your decisions. This is the transformation Solomon underwent, and this is the transformation available to you. But it requires that you value wisdom above knowledge, that you prioritize consciousness, transformation above information accumulation, that you practice accessing deeper states of awareness with the same dedication most people apply to their education or career. Let me be clear about something. This doesn't mean you abandon your intellect or make reckless decisions. Wisdom incorporates knowledge, but transcends it. You still use your analytical mind to execute what wisdom reveals. If intuition tells you to start a certain business, you'll still need to use your intellect to create the business plan, manage finances, and handle logistics. But the fundamental direction, the key decisions, the navigation through uncertainty, these come from wisdom, not knowledge. Solomon didn't become wealthy by having more information than everyone else. He became wealthy by having clearer perception, deeper insight, and direct access to divine intelligence that showed him what others couldn't see. There's a story about Solomon that illustrates this perfectly. Two women came to him, both claiming to be the mother of the same baby. There was no way to determine the truth through logic or evidence. Both women had their story. Both insisted the child was theirs. Solomon could have spent hours interrogating them, analyzing their claims, trying to find inconsistencies. Instead, he accessed wisdom. He said, "Bring me a sword, cut the baby in half, and give each woman half." Immediately, one woman said, "Please give her the baby. Don't kill him." The other said, "Neither of us shall have him. Cut him in half." In that moment, Solomon knew the real mother's love wouldn't allow harm to come to her child. Wisdom revealed truth in an instant, where knowledge and logic would have struggled indefinitely. This is the power you need for navigating financial decisions. You need the ability to perceive truth beyond surface appearances, to sense what's real beneath what people say, to know which opportunities are genuine and which are traps. Your analytical mind can be fooled. Your emotions can be manipulated. But wisdom, true wisdom that comes from alignment with divine intelligence, sees clearly. It perceives reality as it actually is, not as it appears or as you wish it to be. And from that clear perception, right action becomes obvious. Developing this capacity requires you to trust something beyond your thinking mind. And for most people, this is terrifying. You've been trained to believe that if you can't explain something logically, if you can't justify it rationally, then it's not valid. But wisdom often operates beyond logic. It knows things that can't be explained until after the fact. Solomon made decisions that seemed irrational to his advisors but turned out to be brilliant. He trusted guidance that came from deeper knowing rather than surface analysis. This is the faith that wisdom requires. Not blind faith that abandons intelligence, but evolved faith that recognizes intelligence comes in forms beyond logic. The transformation from knowledge to wisdom also changes how you learn. Someone operating from knowledge alone reads books and tries to memorize information. Someone operating from wisdom reads books and allows the information to transform their consciousness. The difference is profound. Knowledge says, "I know this concept." Wisdom says, "I have become this truth." Knowledge can be forgotten or remain theoretical. Wisdom is embodied, integrated, lived. It's not something you possess. It's something you are. Solomon didn't possess wisdom like a collection of insights. He was wisdom. It flowed through every decision, every word, every action. He had become the living expression of divine intelligence. You must make this same shift if you want wealth to flow naturally, rather than be constantly pursued. You must stop trying to know everything about money and start becoming wisdom about prosperity. This means spending less time consuming information and more time in states of consciousness where transformation happens. It means valuing the silence, where wisdom speaks over the noise, where knowledge shouts. It means trusting the guidance that comes from your heart and gut as much as or more than the analysis that comes from your head. It means practicing daily, entering those deeper states where infinite intelligence is accessible. Here's a practice that bridges knowledge and wisdom, helping you transform information into embodied truth. Take something you've learned about wealth creation, perhaps a principle from this book or another source. Rather than just intellectually understanding it, sit with it in meditation. Allow yourself to feel into the truth of it. Ask yourself, what would my life look like if I fully embodied this principle? Who would I need to become for this truth to be my living reality? Then sit in silence and allow wisdom to show you. Don't force answers with your thinking mind. Simply remain open and receptive. Images might come, feelings might arise, insights might appear. This is wisdom transforming knowledge into consciousness. This is how you evolve from someone who knows about wealth to someone who is wealth. Solomon did this naturally because his consciousness was so refined, so aligned with divine truth. But you must do it intentionally, repeatedly, until it becomes natural for you as well. Every time you practice moving from knowledge to wisdom, from thinking to knowing, from analysis to intuition, you're strengthening your capacity to access the infinite intelligence that Solomon relied upon. You're developing the state of being from which true prosperity flows. You're becoming someone who doesn't need to know all the answers because you're connected to the source where all answers originate. This is the ultimate freedom. When you live from wisdom rather than knowledge alone, you're no longer bound by what you've learned or limited by what you don't know. You have access to guidance that sees the whole picture, that knows the future implications of present choices, that can navigate complexity with ease. You become like Solomon, making decisions that seem inspired because they are inspired. They're coming from divine intelligence flowing through human consciousness. This is your birthright. This is your potential. This is the state of being where wealth creation becomes natural, effortless, and inevitable. Knowledge might tell you how to make money, but wisdom makes you the kind of person to whom money naturally flows. That's the difference. That's the transformation. That's Solomon's secret. Chapter 5. The Inner Temple, Building Wealth from Within. Solomon's most famous achievement was building the temple in Jerusalem, a structure so magnificent that its splendor was legendary across the ancient world. It took 7 years to construct, required the labor of thousands, and was adorned with pure gold, precious stones, and the finest materials available. Kings and queens traveled vast distances just to witness its beauty. But here's what most people miss. The physical temple was never the point. It was a symbol, a material representation of something far more important. The real temple Solomon was building was internal. It was the structure of his consciousness, the foundation of his being, the inner architecture from which all outer abundance flows. And until you build your own inner temple, until you create a consciousness strong enough to hold wealth, prosperity will always slip through your fingers no matter how hard you work to obtain it. Think about people who win the lottery. Statistics show that 70% of lottery winners end up broke within a few years. They receive millions of dollars, more money than most people earn in a lifetime, and somehow they lose it all. How is this possible? It's possible because they never built the inner temple. Their external circumstances changed dramatically, but their internal consciousness remained the same. They were the same person with limiting beliefs, poor financial habits, and scarcity programming, just temporarily holding a lot of money. And because consciousness always creates reality, because your inner world determines your outer world, their consciousness of lack eventually recreated the lack they had always known. The money disappeared because there was no internal structure to hold it. This is the principle Solomon understood completely. He knew that before you could build anything of lasting value externally, you had to build the foundation internally. You had to construct a consciousness capable of supporting the weight of abundance. Most people do it backward. They try to build wealth externally, while their internal consciousness is still structured for poverty. It's like trying to fill a bucket with holes in it. No matter how much you pour in, it all drains out because the container isn't solid. Solomon spent his life building a consciousness with no holes, no leaks, no weak spots. He created an inner temple so solid, so well constructed, so aligned with divine truth that wealth could flow in and remain, multiply, expand, and bless, not just him, but generations after him. The inner temple has specific components, and each one must be built with intention and maintained with discipline. The first component is your sense of worthiness. This is the foundation upon which everything else rests. If you don't believe at the deepest level that you deserve wealth, that you're worthy of receiving abundance, that prosperity is your birthright, then no amount of external action will create lasting results. Your subconscious will sabotage you every time you get close to real wealth, because deep down, some part of you believes you don't deserve it. This belief might have been installed in childhood when you heard that you weren't good enough, smart enough, or special enough. It might have come from religious teaching that poverty was somehow more spiritual than wealth. It might have developed from experiences where you felt less valuable than others. But wherever it came from, this unworthiness is poison to your financial future. Solomon's worthiness didn't come from arrogance or ego. It came from understanding his true identity. He knew he was made in the image of the divine, that his consciousness was connected to the infinite intelligence that created the universe, that his being was valuable beyond measure simply because he existed. This wasn't something he had to earn or prove. It was a fundamental truth about the nature of consciousness itself. Every human being carries this same divine spark, this same infinite worth. But most people don't recognize it. They base their worthiness on external achievement, on what they've accomplished or accumulated, on what others think of them. And so, their worthiness is fragile, conditional, constantly threatened by circumstance. You must build a foundation of unconditional worthiness. You must know not just intellectually, but in every cell of your body, that you deserve abundance simply because you exist, not because you worked hard, not because you're better than anyone else, not because you've earned it through suffering or sacrifice, but because worthiness is your nature. You are consciousness itself, temporarily experiencing human form, and consciousness is the source of all creation. You're not separate from the abundance you seek. You are the creative force that produces abundance. When you truly grasp this, when you build your inner temple on this foundation, everything changes. You stop begging for wealth and start claiming it. You stop hoping for prosperity and start expecting it. You stop feeling lucky when money comes and start feeling natural about it. The second component of your inner temple is your belief system about money itself. What do you actually believe about wealth? Not what you think you should believe, not what sounds good when you say it out loud, but what you truly believe in your subconscious. Do you believe money is evil, or that it corrupts people? Do you believe wealthy people are greedy, or that they achieved their success by taking advantage of others? Do you believe there's not enough to go around, that someone else's gain is your loss? These beliefs, even if you're not consciously aware of them, are part of your inner structure. And if your inner temple is built with beliefs that wealth is negative, dangerous, or wrong, then your subconscious will protect you from it. It will keep you poor, to keep you safe, to keep you good, to keep you aligned with what it believes is right. Solomon believed that wealth was a blessing, a natural expression of divine abundance, a tool for creating good in the world. He didn't see money as evil. He saw it as neutral energy that could be directed toward whatever purpose the holder chose. In his hands, wealth built temples, supported the poor, created beauty, advanced knowledge, and blessed his entire kingdom. His beliefs about money were aligned with prosperity, so prosperity flowed naturally. You must examine your beliefs with brutal honesty. Write them down. Look at the ones that aren't serving you, and then consciously, deliberately, replace them with beliefs that support the wealth you want to create. This is reconstruction of your inner temple, removing faulty materials and installing solid ones. The third component is your relationship with receiving. Most people are terrible at receiving. They're uncomfortable when someone gives them a compliment. They feel guilty when someone pays for their meal. They deflect praise, minimize their accomplishments, and unconsciously push abundance away, even while consciously claiming they want it. This inability to receive is a structural flaw in your inner temple. If you can't receive a compliment without deflecting, how will you receive millions of dollars without sabotaging? Receiving is a skill, a capacity, a state of openness that must be developed. Solomon was a master receiver. When the Queen of Sheba brought him gifts, he received them graciously. When God offered to give him anything, he received the offer and made a powerful request. When wealth flowed into his kingdom, he received it without guilt or apology. He understood that receiving is as important as giving, that the universe operates on flow, and that blocking reception blocks the entire cycle. Practice receiving in small ways every day. When someone compliments you, instead of saying, "Oh, it's nothing," simply say, "Thank you," and let yourself feel the warmth of receiving appreciation. When someone offers to help you, say yes, instead of insisting you can do it alone. When opportunities come your way, receive them instead of immediately questioning whether you deserve them or whether there's a catch. These small practices are renovating your inner temple, creating openings where abundance can enter. You're teaching your nervous system that it's safe to receive, that receiving doesn't make you weak or indebted, that you're worthy of the good things that come to you. This capacity to receive is essential for wealth creation, because wealth is constantly trying to flow toward you. But if your inner temple has no doors or windows, if you've sealed yourself off from receiving, abundance has nowhere to enter. The fourth component is your emotional resilience. Your inner temple must be strong enough to withstand storms. There will be challenges on your journey to wealth. There will be setbacks, disappointments, failures, and moments when everything seems to be falling apart. If your inner temple crumbles every time something goes wrong, if your consciousness collapses back into fear and scarcity at the first sign of difficulty, you'll never build lasting wealth. Solomon faced enormous challenges ruling a kingdom, managing complex politics, making life and death decisions. But his inner temple was so solid that external storms couldn't shake his internal peace. He remained centered, clear, connected to divine wisdom, even in chaos. This stability isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending difficulties don't exist. It's about having a foundation so strong that you can experience challenges without being destroyed by them. without losing your connection to abundance consciousness. Building emotional resilience means developing the capacity to feel difficult emotions without being consumed by them. When fear arises about money, you feel it fully, but you don't let it drive your decision. When disappointment comes after a failed venture, you acknowledge it, but you don't make it mean something about your worthiness or your future. When uncertainty appears, you sit with the discomfort without needing to immediately escape into distraction or numbness. Solomon's wisdom included emotional mastery. He could hold space for the full spectrum of human experience without losing himself in it. This is the strength your inner temple needs, not the rigid strength that refuses to bend and therefore breaks, but the flexible strength that bends with storms and returns to center afterward. The fifth component is your vision for what you're building. Solomon didn't just accumulate wealth randomly. He had a clear vision for what he wanted to create, how he wanted to serve, what legacy he wanted to leave. His temple was built according to specific plans, with every detail considered and intentional. Your inner temple needs the same clarity. What are you building your wealth for? What's the vision that makes prosperity meaningful? If you're just trying to get rich to prove something or to feel better about yourself, your inner temple is built on sand. But if you're creating wealth to express your purpose, to serve something larger than yourself, to make a contribution that matters, your inner temple is built on bedrock. Vision gives your wealth creation direction and meaning. It ensures that even when you achieve financial success, you won't feel empty because the success is connected to something that genuinely fulfills you. Take time to clarify your vision, not the surface desire for money, but the deeper purpose that money would serve. Do you want wealth so you can create freedom for your family, so you can fund causes you believe in, so you can express your creativity without constraint, so you can travel and experience the fullness of life? Whatever it is, make it clear and compelling. Write it down. Visualize it. Feel it. This vision becomes a load-bearing wall in your inner temple, a structure that holds everything together and gives your wealth creation efforts coherence and power. Solomon's vision was building a kingdom that honored divine wisdom and blessed his people. Your vision might be different, but it needs to be just as clear and just as meaningful to you. The sixth component is your daily practice. Your inner temple isn't built once and then left alone. It requires constant maintenance, regular attention, ongoing refinement. Solomon didn't achieve his consciousness of wisdom in a single moment and then coast forever. He maintained practices that kept him aligned with divine intelligence. He started each day connecting to the source of his wisdom. He reflected regularly on his decisions and their outcomes. He remained a student of truth, even as he became the teacher of nations. Your inner temple requires the same devotion, daily meditation to maintain your connection to infinite intelligence, regular examination of your beliefs to ensure they're still serving you, consistent practice of receiving, of gratitude, of elevated emotions that keep your frequency aligned with abundance. This isn't optional if you want lasting wealth. This is the work that keeps your inner temple strong, stable, and capable of holding the prosperity you're creating. Most people fail at wealth creation not because they don't know the right strategies, but because their inner temple is weak. They haven't done the foundational work of building a consciousness that can support abundance. They're trying to hold millions in a consciousness built for thousands, trying to receive prosperity with a nervous system wired for scarcity, trying to maintain wealth with beliefs that say they don't deserve it. It doesn't work. It can't work. The external will always conform to the internal. Your bank account will always reflect your consciousness, perhaps not immediately, but eventually, inevitably. This is the law that Solomon understood and that you must integrate completely. The beautiful truth is that building your inner temple is work you can start right now. You don't need money to build it. You don't need permission. You don't need perfect circumstances. You simply need commitment and consistency. Start with worthiness. Spend time each day affirming your inherent value, your divine nature, your right to abundance. Feel it until it's real in your body, not just a concept in your mind. Examine your beliefs about money and consciously choose beliefs that support wealth. Practice receiving in every small interaction. Build emotional resilience by staying present with difficult feelings instead of avoiding them. Clarify your vision for why wealth matters to you, and establish daily practices that maintain your connection to the consciousness you're cultivating. Solomon spent 7 years building the physical temple, but he spent his entire life building and maintaining his inner temple. The physical structure eventually fell to enemies centuries after his death, but his consciousness, his wisdom, his understanding of divine truth, that has lasted thousands of years, still teaching, still inspiring, still showing us what's possible when you build from within. Your inner temple is the most important construction project you'll ever undertake. It's the foundation for everything else. Build it strong. Build it on truth. Build it with the same care and attention Solomon brought to his temple. And watch as your external wealth becomes a natural, inevitable reflection of your internal abundance. The work of building your inner temple never ends, but that's what makes it sacred. Each day that you're adding another stone, reinforcing another wall, polishing another surface, each moment of choosing elevated emotion over reactive fear, each instance of receiving instead of deflecting, each time you affirm your worthiness instead of questioning it, you're strengthening the structure. And unlike physical buildings that decay over time, your inner temple grows stronger and more magnificent with each year you invest in it. This is the real wealth Solomon accumulated. Not gold that could be stolen or kingdoms that could fall, but a consciousness so aligned with divine truth, so solid in its foundation, so beautiful in its construction, that it became his true and eternal treasure. Build yours with the same devotion, and you'll discover what Solomon knew. When the inner temple is complete, outer abundance is inevitable. Chapter 6. The Proverbs of Manifestation. Decoding the Hidden Secrets. The book of Proverbs has been read for thousands of years as simple moral instruction, practical wisdom for living a good life. But hidden within those seemingly straightforward verses are quantum principles of manifestation, encoded instructions for reprogramming your consciousness, and specific formulas for creating wealth that most readers completely miss. Solomon wasn't just offering nice advice when he wrote these proverbs. He was leaving a detailed manual for how consciousness creates reality, disguised in language simple enough for anyone to understand, yet profound enough to transform your entire financial existence. When you decode what Solomon was actually teaching, when you understand the deeper principles beneath the surface words, you gain access to the same manifestation technology that made him the wealthiest man on earth. Let's start with one of Solomon's most famous proverbs. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Most people read this and nod politely, thinking it means that positive thinking is good. But Solomon wasn't talking about your thoughts. He was talking about your heart, and specifically about what you think in your heart, which in ancient understanding meant what you feel at the deepest emotional level. This is a quantum principle disguised as spiritual wisdom. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field that broadcasts your emotional state into the quantum field around you. What you feel in your heart, what you embody emotionally, is what you are vibrationally. and what you are vibrationally is what you attract, create, and experience. Solomon understood that your identity isn't determined by your circumstances or even your conscious thoughts. Your identity is determined by the emotional state you consistently inhabit. Change what you feel in your heart, and you change what you are. Change what you are, and you change everything. This principle is the foundation of all manifestation. You cannot think your way to wealth if your heart is feeling poverty. You cannot affirm abundance while your emotional body is contracted in fear. The thoughts in your head mean nothing compared to the feelings in your heart. Solomon knew this completely. His wisdom wasn't intellectual knowledge, it was embodied truth. He felt wealthy, wise, and blessed at the level of his heart, and his external reality had no choice but to reflect that internal state. This is why affirmations alone rarely work. You can repeat "I am wealthy" 1,000 times, but if your heart is saying "I'm scared about money," your heart wins every time. The quantum field responds to electromagnetic signals, not words. Your heart is broadcasting your true state 24 hours a day, and that broadcast is creating your reality moment by moment. Another proverb that contains hidden manifestation technology: where there is no vision, the people perish. Again, most people think this is about having goals or dreams, but Solomon was describing a specific neurological and quantum principle. Your brain has a system called the reticular activating system, or RAS, that filters the millions of bits of information coming at you every second and decides what gets your conscious attention. Your RAS is programmed by what you focus on repeatedly with emotional intensity. When you have a clear vision that you emotionally connect with every day, your RAS begins to filter reality differently. It starts showing you opportunities, resources, and connections that were always there, but invisible to you before. Without vision, without that clear image of what you're creating, held with emotional intensity, your RAS has no direction. You literally perish, not physically, but in terms of possibility. You remain blind to the abundance surrounding you because your perceptual filters aren't set to see it. Solomon's vision was crystal clear. He could see his kingdom prospering, his temple completed, his people blessed. And he didn't just see these things occasionally. He held these visions with such emotional intensity that they became more real to him than his present circumstances. This is advanced manifestation. When your vision is more real than your reality, when you feel your future more intensely than your present, you create a neurological and electromagnetic pull toward that future. Your brain starts making connections that move you in that direction. Your heart starts broadcasting the frequency that attracts the circumstances you need. Vision isn't optional for wealth creation. It's the programming language that tells your nervous system and the quantum field what to create. Without it, you're drifting, reacting, surviving, but not creating. Consider this proverb: the blessing of the Lord brings wealth, without painful toil for it. This verse has been misunderstood for centuries. Some think it means you should wait passively for God to give you money. Others think it means work isn't necessary. But Solomon was revealing something far more profound. The blessing of the Lord is alignment with divine consciousness, with the truth of your being, with the natural flow of abundance that exists when you're not blocking it with resistance. When you're aligned, when your consciousness is clear, when you're vibrating at the frequency of prosperity, wealth comes naturally, not without action, but without the painful toil that comes from forcing and struggling and trying to make things happen from a state of lack. Solomon didn't toil painfully for his wealth. He aligned his consciousness with divine truth, and wealth flowed as a natural consequence. The action he took was inspired, energized, and effective because it came from alignment rather than desperation. Most people experience painful toil around money because they're trying to create from separation consciousness. They believe they're separate from the source of abundance, that they have to fight for resources, that wealth is scarce and must be grabbed before someone else gets it. This belief creates enormous resistance, and that resistance makes every action feel like struggle. But when you understand that you're not separate from abundance, that consciousness itself is the source of all creation, that you're literally made of the same creative energy that produces everything, the struggle disappears. You still take action, but it feels different. It feels aligned, natural, flowing. This is what Solomon meant. The blessing, the alignment, the recognition of your true nature brings wealth without the painful toil that comes from thinking you're separate from your good. Here's another proverb that contains quantum instruction. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In manifestation terms, this translates to trust the intelligence of the quantum field, the wisdom that created you, the infinite consciousness that knows how to manifest your desires in ways your limited logical mind cannot comprehend. Don't lean on your understanding, your analysis, your need to figure out exactly how everything will happen. Your logical mind operates in limitation. It only sees what it's seen before. It can only create combinations of past experiences. But the quantum field has access to infinite possibilities, infinite paths, infinite ways to bring your vision into reality. When you trust that deeper intelligence, when you surrender your need to control every detail, you open yourself to manifestations that exceed anything you could have planned with your conscious mind alone. Solomon demonstrated this trust constantly. He made decisions that didn't make sense logically, but were guided by divine wisdom. He trusted the intelligence flowing through him more than his own understanding, and that trust allowed miracles to happen, allowed solutions to appear that no amount of logical planning could have produced. This isn't about being passive or abdicating responsibility. It's about recognizing that you're partnered with infinite intelligence, that you don't have to figure everything out alone, that your job is to align your consciousness and take inspired action while trusting the field to handle the details you can't see or control. This trust eliminates so much stress and anxiety from the wealth creation process. You're no longer carrying the burden of trying to manipulate every circumstance. You're flowing with divine orchestration. The proverb, "Give, and it will be given to you," has been taught primarily as moral instruction about generosity. But Solomon was describing an energetic law. When you give from a consciousness of abundance, when you share freely because you know there's more than enough, you're broadcasting the frequency of prosperity. You're telling your subconscious and the quantum field that you have abundance to spare, and the field, being a perfect mirror, reflects that consciousness back to you as more abundance. But notice the crucial distinction. You must give from abundance consciousness, not from scarcity trying to manipulate a return. If you give while secretly worrying about your own lack, while hoping this giving will obligate the universe to give back, you're actually broadcasting scarcity, and that's what you'll receive more of. Solomon gave extravagantly, but his giving came from a deep knowing that the source was infinite. He was not depleting himself. He was allowing abundance to flow through him, and the more it flowed through him, the more came to him. This principle terrifies people operating from scarcity consciousness. They think that giving means they'll have less. But energetically, the opposite is true. Hoarding constricts your field and tells the universe you're afraid there's not enough. Giving expands your field, and tells the universe you're in overflow. The field responds accordingly. This doesn't mean you give everything away irresponsibly, or that you ignore practical financial management. It means you practice generosity as a declaration of your abundance consciousness. You tip well, give to causes you believe in, help others when you can, all from a feeling of overflow rather than obligation. This practice reprograms your subconscious away from scarcity and toward abundance. It's manifestation technology disguised as virtue. Consider this powerful proverb. Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. Solomon understood that anxiety, worry, and fear are low-frequency emotions that literally weigh down your electromagnetic field. When your heart is heavy with anxiety about money, you're broadcasting a frequency that attracts more circumstances to be anxious about. But when your heart is light, when you're in states of joy, kindness, and elevated emotion, you're broadcasting a frequency that attracts circumstances worth celebrating. This isn't about denying real problems or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about understanding that your emotional state is creating your next moment. And if you want your next moment to be different from this one, you must shift your emotional state now. Solomon could have been anxious about ruling a kingdom, managing complex politics, handling the enormous responsibility he carried. But he chose wisdom, peace, and elevated states because he knew those states would create better outcomes than anxiety ever could. The instruction here is clear. Guard your emotional state more carefully than you guard your money. Your emotions are the creative force. Your emotions are broadcasting your future. If you're anxious about money, you're literally creating more things to be anxious about. But if you can find reasons to feel grateful, joyful, and peaceful, even before your circumstances change, you're shifting the creative force toward abundance. This is mastery. This is what Solomon practiced. He didn't wait for everything to be perfect to feel good. He chose elevated emotions as a strategy for creating perfection. This is backwards from how most people operate. And that's exactly why most people don't experience the abundance Solomon did. Here's a proverb that speaks directly to manifestation timing. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Most people interpret this as patience, as waiting for the right moment. But Solomon was teaching about alignment with natural cycles, with divine timing, with the rhythms of manifestation that you can't force. Sometimes you plant seeds of intention, and they manifest quickly. Sometimes there's a gestation period where nothing seems to be happening on the surface, but enormous transformation is occurring underneath. If you plant a tomato seed, you'll see results in weeks. If you plant an oak tree seed, you might wait decades. Both are manifestation, but they operate on different timelines. Solomon understood that trying to force manifestation before its natural time creates struggle and often ruins what's trying to emerge. But when you align with the season, when you plant your intentions and then trust the process, manifestation happens naturally and often exceeds what you tried to force. This teaching requires you to develop patience and trust, qualities that are rare in our instant gratification culture. You might set an intention for wealth and expect it to appear next week. When it doesn't, you lose faith, change course, or decide manifestation doesn't work. But perhaps that particular seed needs more time. Perhaps there are things being arranged behind the scenes that you can't see. Perhaps your consciousness is being prepared to hold the wealth you're requesting. Solomon built his temple over 7 years. He could have tried to rush it, cut corners, force completion faster. But he honored the time required, and the result was a structure of legendary magnificence. Your wealth might require time to build properly. That doesn't mean manifestation isn't working. It means you're building something substantial, something lasting, something worth the wait. The proverb, "Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed," contains wisdom about consciousness and manifestation that goes beyond simple advice to seek help. Solomon was acknowledging that your individual consciousness, brilliant as it is, has blind spots. You can't see your own limiting beliefs clearly. You can't perceive the opportunities that lie outside your current awareness. But when you connect with other consciousnesses, when you seek wisdom from those who've achieved what you're trying to create, when you humble yourself to learn from others, you expand your own consciousness. You begin to see what you couldn't see before. You access possibilities that were invisible from your previous perspective. This isn't weakness, it's intelligence. Solomon, the wisest man alive, still sought counsel. He still listened to others. He still expanded his consciousness through connection. This openness to learning, to growing, to being influenced by higher consciousness is what keeps your manifestation abilities evolving rather than stagnating. Another profound teaching. The heart of the discerning acquires knowledge, for the ears of the wise seek it out. This proverb reveals that wisdom isn't passive. You don't just wait for understanding to fall into your lap. The wise actively seek knowledge, and their seeking comes from the heart, from a genuine desire for truth, rather than ego's need to be right or appear smart. Solomon sought wisdom his entire life. He never stopped learning, growing, expanding his understanding. This seeking kept his consciousness flexible, open, alive. When you stop seeking, when you think you already know everything, your consciousness crystallizes. You stop growing, stop evolving, stop accessing new levels of abundance. But when you remain a student, when your heart genuinely desires truth, and your ears actively listen for wisdom, your consciousness continues expanding. And as your consciousness expands, so does your capacity for wealth. You begin to perceive opportunities at higher levels, to understand principles at deeper layers, to manifest abundance at greater scales. The Proverbs also address the power of words. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Solomon understood that words aren't just sounds. They're creative forces. Every word you speak is a declaration to your subconscious and to the quantum field about what you believe and what you expect. When you speak poverty, "I'm so broke, I can't afford that. Money is always tight." You're programming your subconscious for scarcity and broadcasting that frequency into the field. The universe hears those declarations as orders and works to fulfill them. But when you speak abundance, "Money flows to me easily. I'm so grateful for my prosperity. I always have more than enough." You're programming prosperity and broadcasting that frequency. This isn't about lying or denying current reality. It's about understanding that your words are creating your future reality, and you have the power to choose which reality you're speaking into existence. Solomon spoke with authority about prosperity because he embodied it. His words carried weight because they were backed by the consciousness that created them. Your words need the same alignment. Don't just speak prosperity affirmations while feeling poor. Feel the abundance first. Generate the frequency in your heart, and then speak from that state. When your words match your emotional frequency, they become exponentially more powerful. They're not just wishful thinking. They're creative declarations backed by the electromagnetic broadcast of your heart. This is how Solomon used language to create reality. Every word was intentional, aligned with his consciousness, and therefore powerfully creative. Here's the synthesis of all these proverbs, the master key that Solomon was revealing. Manifestation isn't about doing more or knowing special technique. It's about being aligned. When your heart feels abundant, when your vision is clear, when you trust divine intelligence, when you give generously, when you guard your emotional state, when you honor timing, when you seek wisdom, when you speak with intention, you're in alignment. And from alignment, manifestation happens naturally, inevitably, powerfully. You're no longer trying to force reality to bend to your will. You're allowing reality to flow from your consciousness. You're not manipulating circumstances. You're creating from the inside out. This is Solomon's secret, encoded in simple proverbs that have survived thousands of years, waiting for you to decode them and apply their transformative power to your own wealth creation journey. Chapter 7. Dissolving the Fear of Loss. The consciousness of infinite source, the greatest obstacle between you and lasting wealth, isn't lack of opportunity, inadequate education, or insufficient resources. It's fear. Specifically, the fear of losing what you have or might have. This fear operates like an invisible force field around your finances, repelling abundance even as you consciously try to attract it. You might not recognize this fear because it disguises itself as prudence, caution, or responsible financial planning. But underneath the rational justifications, there's a primal terror that whispers, what if I lose everything? What if it all disappears? What if I end up with nothing? This fear contracts your consciousness, collapses your electromagnetic field, and broadcasts a frequency that guarantees you'll experience exactly what you're afraid of. Solomon understood this completely, and his wealth wasn't just a result of what he did, but of what he didn't do. He didn't operate from fear. He lived from a consciousness so aligned with infinite source that loss was literally impossible in his understanding of reality. Think about how fear of loss manifests in your daily life. You see an investment opportunity that excites you, but immediately the fear whispers, what if you lose your money? You consider starting a business, but the fear says, what if it fails and you're worse off than before? You think about being generous with your resources, but the fear contracts you with, what if you need that money later and it's gone? These fears seem rational, protective, wise even, but they're actually the consciousness of scarcity masquerading as wisdom. True wisdom doesn't come from fear. It comes from connection to infinite intelligence. Fear makes decisions from limitation, constantly calculating how to protect the little you have. Wisdom makes decisions from abundance, knowing that the source is inexhaustible, and that loss is just an illusion, created by believing you're separate from that source. Solomon could give away enormous wealth without anxiety, because he knew something most people never grasp. You can't lose what you are. If wealth is something external that you have, then yes, you can lose it. It can be stolen, spent, depleted, destroyed. But if wealth is a consciousness you embody, a frequency you broadcast, a state of being you've become, then loss is impossible. You might lose physical money temporarily, but your consciousness of abundance remains intact, and that consciousness will recreate wealth just as naturally as your body regrows skin after a cut. This is the shift from having wealth to being wealth, and it's the most important transformation you can make. When you are wealth, when prosperity is your identity rather than your possession, fear of loss dissolves because you understand that the source of your abundance is internal and infinite, not external and limited. Let me show you what fear does to your brain and body. When you're afraid of losing money, your nervous system activates its threat response. Your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, takes control and shuts down the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for creativity, possibility thinking, and complex decision-making. Blood flow moves from your brain to your extremities, preparing you to fight or flee from the perceived danger. Your body releases cortisol and adrenaline, stress hormones that are useful for escaping physical threats, but devastating for making financial decisions. In this state, you literally cannot perceive opportunities. Your brain is scanning only for threats. You become hyper-focused on what could go wrong, blind to what could go right. This is why people make their worst financial decisions from fear. They're operating with a compromised nervous system and a brain that's incapable of seeing possibilities. Solomon never made decisions from this state. His consciousness was so elevated, so aligned with divine wisdom, that fear couldn't hijack his nervous system. He remained calm, centered, and connected to infinite intelligence even when facing challenges that would paralyze most people. This wasn't because he was superhuman or because he never faced real threats. It was because he had cultivated a consciousness that knew fear was always based on illusion, on the false belief that you're separate from your good, that resources are limited, that you could somehow be cut off from the infinite abundance of the universe. He saw through these illusions to the truth. Consciousness is the source, and consciousness is infinite. The fear of loss is rooted in the belief that there's not enough money, not enough opportunity, not enough time, not enough resources to go around. This is scarcity consciousness at its core, and it's a lie. The universe is abundant beyond measure. There are more than enough resources for every human being on this planet to live in prosperity. The limitation isn't in the universe, it's in consciousness. When you believe in scarcity, when you fear that having more means someone else has less, when you worry that opportunities are limited, and if you miss this one, you'll never get another, you contract your consciousness and your electromagnetic field. You literally make yourself smaller energetically, and from that contracted state, you can only perceive and create limited circumstances. Your fear of not enough actually creates not enough in your experience. Solomon operated from the opposite consciousness. He knew that the source was infinite, that divine intelligence could create wealth from nothing, that opportunities were endless because consciousness itself was the creator of opportunities. When he gave away gold, he didn't fear running out because he understood that his wealth wasn't coming from a finite pile of resources. It was flowing from his alignment with infinite source. As long as that alignment remained intact, the flow would continue. This is why he could be so generous without anxiety, so bold in his ventures without paralyzing fear, so stable in his prosperity without constantly worrying about loss. He had shifted his identity from being someone who has money to being someone who is a channel for infinite abundance. You must make this same shift if you want to dissolve the fear of loss. You must stop seeing yourself as someone trying to get and keep wealth, and start seeing yourself as a conduit through which infinite abundance flows. Imagine yourself as a river. A river doesn't worry about running out of water because it's connected to a source that constantly replenishes it. As long as the connection to source remains open, the river flows endlessly. You are that river. Abundance is the water. Divine consciousness is the source. Your only job is to keep the connection open, to remain aligned, to allow the flow. When you understand this, fear dissolves, because you realize that even if all your money disappeared tomorrow, you could recreate it because the source hasn't changed. Your consciousness, your alignment, your connection to infinite intelligence is what creates wealth, not the physical money itself. The money is just the visible expression of your invisible consciousness. Here's a practice that dissolves fear and establishes source consciousness. Sit quietly and bring to mind something you're afraid of losing. Maybe it's money in your bank account. Maybe it's a job. Maybe it's an investment. Feel the fear that arises when you contemplate losing it. Notice where it lives in your body. Notice how it contracts you, makes you feel small, vulnerable, powerless. Now ask yourself, what would still be true about me if I lost this? You'd still be consciousness. You'd still have your creativity, your intelligence, your ability to think and feel and take action. You'd still be connected to infinite source whether you recognized it or not. The external thing you're afraid of losing doesn't determine your worth, your identity, or your ultimate capacity to create abundance. It's just a temporary manifestation of your consciousness at one point in time. If it disappeared, you could create it again because you are the creator, not the creation. As you sit with this truth, feel your body begin to relax. Feel the contraction of fear starting to release. Breathe deeply and imagine that you're breathing in connection to infinite source with each inhale. With each exhale, let go of attachment to any specific form of abundance. You're not trying to convince yourself that loss doesn't matter or that you should be careless with resources. You're simply recognizing that your security doesn't come from external things. It comes from your eternal connection to the creative power of consciousness itself. This practice, repeated consistently, reprograms your nervous system away from fear and toward trust, away from scarcity and toward abundance, away from survival and toward creation. Solomon's lack of fear gave him enormous power in negotiations and decisions. When you're not afraid of losing, you can't be manipulated. You make choices from clarity rather than desperation. You can walk away from opportunities that don't align because you know there will be others. You can be generous because you're not hoarding from scarcity. You can take calculated risks because you trust that even if things don't work out, you'll be fine because you are connected to infinite source. This freedom is magnetic. People feel it when they're around someone who doesn't operate from fear. They're drawn to that energy. Opportunities flow toward that frequency. Solomon's lack of fear wasn't just good for his inner peace, it was strategic for his wealth creation. Contrast this with how most people operate. They make financial decisions from fear constantly. They stay in jobs they hate because they're afraid they won't find another one. They don't invest in opportunities because they're afraid of losing money. They don't start businesses because they're afraid of failure. They don't give generously because they're afraid there won't be enough for them. And all of this fear-based decision-making keeps them trapped in the exact circumstances they're trying to escape. Fear is a prison that looks like safety. It promises to protect you, but actually keeps you small. Solomon understood this, and he chose freedom over the illusion of security that fear offers. The dissolution of fear also changes your relationship with money in profound ways. When you're not afraid of losing it, you can use money as a tool rather than worshiping it as a god. You can make strategic investments without emotional attachment to specific outcomes. You can be generous without expecting return. You can spend on things that bring genuine value without guilt or anxiety. Money becomes energy that flows through your life, rather than something you desperately cling to. This shift in relationship is essential for creating real wealth, because money, like all energy, needs to flow. When you hold it too tightly from fear, you stop the flow. But when you use it wisely while trusting that more will come, you keep the energy moving and expanding. There's a story that illustrates Solomon's consciousness perfectly. When two women came before him, both claiming to be the mother of the same baby, he could have been paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong decision. Such a mistake would have damaged his reputation, caused suffering to an innocent child, and undermined trust in his wisdom. But he didn't make the decision from fear of being wrong. He accessed divine intelligence, proposed cutting the baby in half. and immediately knew the truth based on the women's responses. His lack of fear allowed him to be creative, bold, and ultimately correct. If he had operated from fear, he might have agonized, overthought, second-guessed himself into paralysis or poor judgment. But his connection to Source, his lack of fear, gave him access to wisdom that transcended logical analysis. You face decisions every day where fear tries to drive your choices. What if you made those decisions from Source consciousness instead? What if you approached each financial choice knowing that you're connected to infinite abundance, that there's no real scarcity, that even if you make a mistake you'll recover because you are the source of your wealth, not the specific opportunity in front of you? This doesn't mean being reckless or ignoring practical wisdom. It means making decisions from a consciousness of abundance rather than a consciousness of fear. The actions might sometimes look similar, but the energy behind them is completely different, and energy is what creates results. Here's another crucial understanding. The fear of loss isn't really about money at all. It's about survival. Your primitive brain equates money with safety, and safety with survival. When you fear losing money, your brain interprets that as a threat to your very existence. This is why financial stress can feel so overwhelming, so all-consuming. Your nervous system is responding as if your life is in danger. But you must understand that this response is based on outdated programming. In modern life, you're not going to die if you lose money. You might be uncomfortable, you might have to adjust, but you'll survive. And more importantly, you'll recreate abundance if you maintain the consciousness that created it in the first place. When you separate the survival fear from the reality of your situation, you free up enormous energy that was being wasted on anxiety and make it available for creativity and problem-solving instead. Solomon knew he wasn't going to die if he made a generous gift or a bold investment. His sense of safety came from his connection to the divine, not from the size of his treasury. This internal security gave him the freedom to make decisions that others would have found terrifying. He could be extraordinarily generous because his identity wasn't tied to his possessions. He could take risks that paid off spectacularly because he wasn't paralyzed by the fear of loss. His security was internal and eternal, not external and temporary. This is the consciousness you must cultivate. When your sense of safety comes from your unshakable connection to infinite source, when you know at the deepest level that you're eternally secure regardless of external circumstances, fear loses its power over you. The practice of dissolving fear isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing discipline, a constant choosing of trust over terror, abundance consciousness over scarcity consciousness, connection to source over attachment to form. Every time fear arises around money, and it will arise because you've been programmed for scarcity your entire life, you have a choice. You can believe the fear and make decisions from that contracted state, or you can recognize the fear as old programming, breathe through it, reconnect to source consciousness, and make decisions from expansion. The more consistently you choose expansion, the more you rewire your nervous system. Eventually, abundance consciousness becomes your default state, and fear becomes the rare exception rather than the constant companion. Solomon lived in this state of fearless abundance, and his wealth was the natural result. Not because he was special or chosen or different from you in any fundamental way, but because he had cultivated a consciousness that made wealth inevitable. He dissolved the fear of loss by recognizing that he couldn't lose what he truly was. He was consciousness itself, eternally connected to the infinite source of all creation, and from that consciousness, abundance flowed naturally, endlessly, powerfully. This same consciousness is available to you right now, not someday when you're more evolved or more worthy, right now. In this moment, you are consciousness. You are connected to infinite source. You cannot lose what you truly are. When you integrate this truth, not just intellectually, but at the cellular level, when you feel it in your bones and know it in your heart, fear dissolves. And in the absence of fear, in the presence of source consciousness, wealth creation becomes not something you struggle to achieve, but something you naturally express. This is Solomon's gift to you, the recognition that your wealth is as infinite as the consciousness you are, and that consciousness can never be lost, depleted, or diminished. It simply is, eternally abundant, waiting for you to claim it. Chapter 8. Multiplication through generosity. Solomon's paradox. There's a principle that defies all conventional logic about wealth, a paradox that seems to contradict every survival instinct you've developed, yet it's one of the most powerful laws governing prosperity. The more you give, the more you receive. The more freely you share your abundance, the faster it multiplies. The more you release your grip on what you have, the more flows into your hand. This isn't karma or spiritual platitude. This is quantum mechanics. This is electromagnetic law. This is how energy actually moves through consciousness and into physical form. Solomon understood this paradox completely, and his extraordinary generosity wasn't despite his wealth, but because of his understanding of how wealth actually works. He gave away gold, built temples, supported his people lavishly, shared his resources with visiting dignitaries, and somehow his wealth only increased. He had discovered the secret that eludes most people their entire lives. Giving from abundance consciousness is the fastest way to expand that abundance exponentially. Most people approach giving from scarcity. They calculate exactly what they can spare, hold tight to the rest, and give reluctantly while secretly hoping for a return on their investment. This isn't true giving. This is trading, negotiating, manipulating, and the universe responds not to your actions, but to the consciousness behind your action. When you give from scarcity, when you're worried about having enough for yourself, when you're keeping score and expecting reciprocation, you're broadcasting the frequency of lack. You're telling your subconscious and the quantum field that resources are limited, that you must protect what little you have, that there's not enough to go around. And the field, being a perfect mirror, reflects that consciousness back to you as more scarcity, more limitation, more experiences of not having enough. Solomon's giving was different. When he gave from overflow. He wasn't calculating whether he could afford it or worrying about running out. He was allowing abundance to flow through him like water through a river. He understood something that modern physics has now confirmed. Energy must flow to remain healthy and expand. When energy becomes stagnant, it stagnates everything around it. When energy flows, it creates more energy. Your wealth is energy in physical form. If you hoard it, grip it tightly, refuse to let it flow, it stagnates. It might not disappear immediately, but it stops growing, stops multiplying, stops bringing you joy. But when you allow it to flow through acts of generosity, when you give freely and joyfully, you keep the energy moving, and moving energy always expands. Let me show you what happens energetically when you give from true abundance consciousness. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field that extends 15 feet beyond your physical body. When you feel genuine joy in giving, when you experience the pleasure of blessing someone else, when you share without attachment to outcome, your heart produces a coherent electromagnetic signature. This coherent field is literally broadcasting the frequency of abundance into the quantum field around you. You're declaring through your energy, not just your words, that you have more than enough, that you live in overflow, that you're connected to infinite source. The quantum field receives this declaration and works to create circumstances that match this frequency. You gave away money, but you expanded your consciousness of abundance. And consciousness always creates reality to match itself. There's a neurological component to this as well. When you give generously, your brain releases oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin, the same chemicals that are released when you receive gifts or experience pleasure. Scientists call this the helper's high, but it's more than just feeling good. These chemicals rewire your neural pathways, creating associations between giving and pleasure, between generosity and abundance, between sharing and receiving. Over time, your brain literally programs itself to expect that giving leads to receiving. This expectation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You give, your brain expects more to come. That expectation influences your perception and behavior, and you unconsciously create circumstances that bring more abundance. Solomon's brain was wired this way. Giving was pleasurable to him because his neural pathways associated it with increase, not decrease. Contrast this with how scarcity-minded people experience giving. They give reluctantly, feeling the loss, worrying about the sacrifice, hoping desperately for a return. Their brains release stress hormones instead of pleasure chemicals. They create neural pathways that associate giving with loss, generosity with depletion, sharing with danger. And then they wonder why giving doesn't seem to bring them more abundance. It's because their consciousness is wrong. They're doing the right action with the wrong energy, and energy is what creates results. Solomon never gave reluctantly. Every act of generosity was a celebration of his abundance, a declaration of his connection to infinite source, an energetic broadcast that expanded his wealth consciousness, and therefore his actual wealth. The principle of giving to receive isn't about manipulation. It's not, I'll give this, so the universe owes me that. That's still scarcity consciousness trying to use spiritual laws like a vending machine. True generosity, the kind that multiplies wealth, comes from recognizing that you're not the source of your abundance. You're the channel. Infinite intelligence is the source, and it's flowing through you constantly. When you give, you're not depleting your supply because your supply isn't limited to what you currently hold. Your supply is unlimited because it's coming from consciousness itself, and consciousness is infinite. Solomon knew this. He could be extravagantly generous because he understood that his wealth wasn't coming from his treasury. It was coming from his alignment with divine abundance, and that alignment was constant as long as his consciousness remained elevated. This shifts everything about how you approach giving. You're no longer giving from your limited resources, hoping you'll have enough left. You're giving from infinite source, knowing that the act of giving actually strengthens your connection to that source. Every time you give joyfully, you're practicing abundance consciousness. You're training your nervous system to feel safe with money flowing out as well as in. You're teaching your subconscious that you trust the flow, that you're not afraid of scarcity, that you know more is always coming. This training is invaluable. Most people are comfortable receiving, but terrified of giving, because giving triggers their scarcity programming. But when you heal that programming through conscious, generous giving, you remove one of the biggest blocks to wealth. You become someone who can receive and give with equal ease, and that fluidity is essential for creating massive abundance. There's another dimension to this principle that Solomon mastered: strategic generosity. He didn't just give randomly or emotionally. He gave strategically to expand his influence, build relationships, create goodwill, and establish his reputation as a wise and generous ruler. When the Queen of Sheba visited, he gave her gifts so lavish that she was overwhelmed. This wasn't foolish extravagance. It was strategic expansion of his consciousness and his influence. His generosity became legendary, which attracted more people, more trade, more opportunities to his kingdom. His giving was an investment in his brand, in his relationships, in the energetic network that would continue producing abundance. Modern, successful people understand this. They donate to causes, support emerging talent, invest in their communities, not just from altruism, but from understanding that generosity creates networks, opportunities, and goodwill that return multiplied. You can apply this principle immediately in your own life. Start where you are, with what you have. If you have $10, find a way to give one joyfully, not reluctantly, not with worry, but with genuine pleasure in blessing someone else. Feel the abundance of having something to share. Generate gratitude for being in a position to give rather than only receive. Notice how this feels in your body. You're training yourself to associate giving with positive emotions, creating the neural pathways that will support greater generosity as your wealth grows. Then pay attention to what happens next, not with desperate expectation of immediate return, but with curious observation of how the energy flows. You might notice opportunities appearing that weren't there before. You might find money coming from unexpected sources. You might experience a shift in how you feel about money, moving from fear to trust. Solomon's generosity wasn't limited to money. He gave his wisdom freely to anyone who sought it. He shared his understanding, his insights, his knowledge, without hoarding it or charging exorbitant fees to access it. This generosity of spirit expanded his influence far beyond what money alone could have done. People traveled from distant lands not to see his gold, but to receive his wisdom. And in sharing his wisdom, he didn't deplete it. If anything, teaching and sharing wisdom deepened his own understanding. This is another aspect of the multiplication principle. Some things increase by being given away. Love, wisdom, kindness, attention, these don't decrease when shared. They expand. And the more you give them, the more you have to give. Solomon understood that true wealth wasn't just financial. It was the wealth of consciousness, of wisdom, of love, of connection. And all of these forms of wealth multiplied through generous sharing. Here's a practice that activates the multiplication principle in your life. Each day, find at least 3 ways to give. One could be financial, even if it's just a generous tip or a small donation. One could be your time, helping someone who needs assistance. One could be your attention, truly listening to someone who needs to be heard. Give all 3 with full presence and joy, not as obligations but as celebrations of your abundance. As you give, say internally, I give from overflow. I am connected to infinite source. More flows to me as I allow it to flow through me. Feel the truth of these words? Let your heart expand with the pleasure of giving. You're not just helping others, you're reprogramming your consciousness for multiplication. You're declaring energetically that you live in a universe of abundance, and that declaration creates the reality you experience. The resistance you'll feel to this practice is your scarcity programming, fighting for survival. Part of you will say, I can't afford to give. I don't have enough for myself. This is the voice of limitation, and you must not let it control your behavior. Start small if you must, but start. Give something, even if it's tiny, from a consciousness of abundance rather than scarcity. The amount doesn't matter as much as the consciousness. Solomon could give thousands of talents of gold because his consciousness was vast. Your consciousness might only support giving a few dollars right now. That's fine. Give those dollars from the same consciousness Solomon gave his gold, and you're activating the same principle. Your external circumstances will catch up to your internal consciousness as you continue the practice. There's also a timing element to multiplication through giving. Solomon didn't wait until he had accumulated all his wealth to start being generous. He was generous from the beginning, and that generosity was part of what created his wealth. Many people think, "I'll be generous when I'm rich," but this is backwards. You become rich partly by being generous before you're rich. Your generosity declares to the universe that you already operate from abundance consciousness, and the universe responds by creating abundant circumstances to match that consciousness. If you wait to give until you feel you have enough, you'll never give, because scarcity consciousness never feels it has enough. There's always one more thing you think you need, one more amount you think you should save. Generosity isn't a destination you reach after wealth. It's a practice that creates wealth. Solomon's reputation for generosity attracted wealth to him like a magnet. People wanted to do business with him because they knew he was fair and generous. Leaders wanted to form alliances with him because they trusted his abundant nature. His kingdom prospered because the energy of generosity flowed throughout it. When a leader operates from abundance and generosity, it creates a culture of the same. When a leader operates from scarcity and hoarding, that too spreads throughout the organization or community. You might not rule a kingdom, but you influence a sphere. Your family, your workplace, your community all feel the energy you bring. When you operate from generosity, you create an energetic environment where abundance can flourish. When you operate from scarcity, you create an environment of contraction and limitation. Which environment do you want to live in? The multiplication principle also applies to forgiveness, which is a form of generosity. When you hold grudges, resentment, or bitterness toward others, you're gripping tightly to negative energy. This grip consumes your attention and energy, leaving less available for creativity and abundance. But when you forgive generously, when you release others from the debt you believe they owe you, you free up enormous energy. You're not condoning harmful behavior or allowing people to hurt you again. You're simply choosing not to carry the weight of resentment because that weight is too expensive. It costs you your peace, your energy, your capacity to create. Solomon understood that forgiveness was an act of self-interest as much as compassion. By forgiving others, he kept his own consciousness clear and elevated, able to access wisdom and create abundance without the drag of negative emotions weighing him down. As you practice generosity consistently, you'll notice a shift in your identity. You'll stop seeing yourself as someone who needs to get and keep, and start seeing yourself as someone through whom abundance flows. This identity shift is crucial because you can only create what matches your identity. If your identity is someone who struggles with money, you'll create struggle. If your identity is someone who doesn't have enough, you'll create lack. But if your identity becomes someone who lives in overflow and shares generously, you'll create circumstances that match that identity. You'll find yourself with more than you need, not just financially, but in every area of life. And from that overflow, you'll give even more generously, which will expand your abundance further, creating an upward spiral of multiplication that has no limit except the limits you place on your own consciousness. Solomon lived in this upward spiral of generous giving and abundant receiving his entire reign. His wealth multiplied exponentially, not despite his generosity, but because of it. He had cracked the code that most people never discover. In the realm of consciousness, giving and receiving aren't opposite actions. They're the same action flowing in different directions. When you give from abundance consciousness, you're simultaneously opening yourself to receive. When you hoard from scarcity consciousness, you're closing yourself to both giving and receiving. The flow stops, and stagnation sets in. But when you keep the flow moving through generous giving, You keep the channels open for generous receiving. This is the paradox. This is the secret. This is how Solomon became the wealthiest man on earth, while also being the most generous. He understood that they weren't contradictory. They were complementary. His generosity was the vehicle for his wealth multiplication, and his wealth gave him greater capacity for generosity. The two fed each other in an endless cycle of expansion and blessing that touched everyone in his kingdom and still teaches us thousands of years later. This same cycle is available to you now. Give generously. Receive graciously. Trust the flow. Watch the multiplication happen in ways that will astound. Chapter 9. Mental Discipline. Governing Your Inner Kingdom. Like Solomon, Solomon ruled one of the most prosperous kingdoms in ancient history, but his greatest achievement wasn't governing the external kingdom of Israel. It was governing the internal kingdom of his own mind. He understood that a man who cannot rule his own thoughts, emotions, and consciousness cannot effectively rule anything external, no matter how much power or wealth he accumulates. His legendary wisdom wasn't just about making good decisions for his people. It was about maintaining absolute mastery over his internal state, choosing his thoughts deliberately, directing his attention strategically, and refusing to allow his mind to be hijacked by fear, doubt, or limiting beliefs. This mental discipline, this unwavering governance of his inner kingdom, was the foundation upon which all his external wealth was built. And until you develop this same level of mental mastery, until you become the conscious ruler of your own consciousness, rather than its passive victim, lasting wealth will remain elusive no matter what strategies you employ or opportunities you pursue. Your mind produces between 60 and 70,000 thoughts per day, and research shows that 90% of those thoughts are the same ones you had yesterday. You're running on autopilot, replaying the same mental programs over and over, creating the same emotional states, broadcasting the same frequencies, and therefore attracting the same circumstances. This is why your life doesn't change even when you want it to desperately. You're not actually thinking new thoughts, or feeling new emotions, or being a new person. You're just recycling the past, and the past can only create more of the past. Solomon refused to live this way. He took complete ownership of his mental state, recognizing that his thoughts were not random occurrences happening to him, but creative forces that he could direct and control. Every thought was chosen consciously. Every emotion was generated deliberately. Every mental state was maintained through discipline, rather than left to the whims of circumstance. Most people have no idea what they're thinking most of the time. They're so identified with the stream of consciousness flowing through their awareness that they believe they are their thoughts. But Solomon understood the crucial distinction. You are not your thoughts. You are the consciousness that observes thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise and dissolve. And from this position of awareness, you have the power to choose which thoughts you engage with, which ones you amplify, and which ones you dismiss. This is sovereignty. This is kingship over your inner realm. When you realize you can observe your thoughts without being controlled by them, you've just claimed the throne of your own consciousness. And from that throne, you can direct the creative power of your mind toward wealth, abundance, and prosperity, instead of unconsciously letting it create limitation, scarcity, and struggle. The practice of mental discipline begins with vigilance. You must become aware of what you're thinking, especially about money. Most people's financial thoughts are unconsciously negative. I can't afford that. Money is tight. I'm always broke. Rich people are lucky, and I'm not. These thoughts run automatically in the background of consciousness, broadcasting frequencies of lack into the quantum field, programming the subconscious for scarcity, and creating neural pathways that lead to poverty. Solomon would never have allowed such thoughts to dominate his consciousness. The moment a limiting thought arose, he would catch it, examine it, and replace it with truth. He governed his mind the way a king governs a kingdom, with authority, decisiveness, and constant attention to maintaining order and alignment with his highest vision. Here's how you develop this same discipline throughout your day, especially at the beginning as you're building this skill. Pause regularly and ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? Don't judge the thoughts. Just observe them. Notice if they're thoughts of lack or abundance, fear or trust, limitation or possibility. When you catch yourself thinking a limiting thought about money, and you will catch yourself dozens of times at first, stop immediately. Don't let it continue playing. Don't engage with it, or believe it, or build on it. Instead, consciously choose a different thought, one that aligns with the wealth consciousness you're cultivating. If you catch yourself thinking, I can't afford this, stop and replace it with, I am creating the wealth to have everything I desire. If you notice I never have enough money, replace it with, money flows to me, easily and abundantly. You're not denying reality or lying to yourself. You're refusing to let limiting thoughts continue programming your subconscious and broadcasting lack into the quantum field. This practice feels awkward at first because you've never questioned your thoughts before. You've just believed them automatically, assumed they were true, let them run wild through your consciousness, creating chaos. But Solomon knew that undisciplined thoughts create undisciplined lives. If you let your mind think whatever it wants without any governance, it will default to its programming, which for most people is scarcity, fear, and limitation installed in childhood. Your mind needs a ruler, and that ruler must be your conscious awareness, choosing thoughts deliberately in alignment with your vision of prosperity. This is hard work initially. It requires constant attention, but like any discipline, it becomes easier with practice until eventually it becomes automatic. You develop a new habit of thinking abundantly, and that habit creates abundance in your life, as naturally as your old habit created lack. Solomon also understood the power of focus. Where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and where you place your energy is what grows in your life. If you focus constantly on what you don't have, on your problems, on your limitations, those things expand. Your attention is feeding them energy, making them larger and more dominant in your experience. But if you focus on abundance, on possibilities, on what's working, those things expand instead. Solomon focused relentlessly on wisdom, prosperity, and divine alignment. He didn't ignore problems, but he didn't give them his primary attention. His attention was on solutions, on opportunities, on the vision of what he was creating. This focus shaped his neural pathways, programmed his subconscious, and directed the creative power of his consciousness toward manifesting his desired reality. You must become equally strategic with your attention. Stop consuming media that fills your consciousness with fear, disaster, and scarcity. Stop engaging in conversations that focus on lack and complaint. Stop giving your attention to things that make you feel poor, powerless, or limited. This isn't about denying reality or living in delusion. It's about understanding that your attention is creative, and you must protect it fiercely because it's your most valuable resource. Solomon could have focused on the threats to his kingdom, the political challenges he faced, the complexity of ruling, but he chose to focus primarily on wisdom and prosperity, and his kingdom reflected that focus. What you focus on expands not because of magic, but because your attention directs your perception. Your perception influences your emotions. Your emotions drive your actions, and your actions create your results. Control your focus, and you control your life. Mental discipline also requires that you guard against the influence of other people's limiting beliefs. You're surrounded by people who think small, believe in scarcity, and unconsciously try to pull you down to their level. They'll tell you your dreams are unrealistic, your goals are too big, your vision is impossible. These aren't evil people. They're just operating from their own limited consciousness, and they can't see beyond their own limitation. Solomon had to deal with this constantly. Not everyone in his kingdom believed in his vision. Not all his advisors understood his decision. But he didn't let their doubts become his doubts. He maintained his own consciousness independent of others' opinions. He ruled his inner kingdom with such authority that external voices couldn't penetrate and contaminate his thinking. You must develop this same impermeability. Listen to wisdom wherever it comes from, but don't absorb other people's limitations. Don't let their fear become your fear. Don't let their scarcity consciousness infect your abundance consciousness. This requires that you be selective about who you spend time with and whose voice you allow into your consciousness. Solomon surrounded himself with wise counselors, people who operated at high levels of consciousness and could support his vision. You need the same environment. Seek out people who think bigger than you currently do, who believe in possibilities you haven't considered, who operate from abundance and can show you what's possible. Distance yourself from chronic complainers, from people who are invested in limitation, from voices that consistently tell you what you can't do. This isn't about being elitist or unkind. It's about recognizing that consciousness is contagious, and you must protect your mental environment as carefully as you protect your physical environment. If you wouldn't eat poison, why would you consume poisonous thoughts from others? Another aspect of mental discipline that Solomon mastered was emotional regulation. He didn't allow his emotions to be controlled by circumstances. He generated his emotional state from within, independent of what was happening externally. When challenges arose, he didn't react with panic or fear. When victories came, he didn't become arrogant or complacent. He maintained emotional equilibrium, a centered state from which he could access wisdom and make clear decisions. This emotional mastery is essential for wealth creation because your emotions are generating the electromagnetic frequency that attracts your experiences. If your emotions are constantly bouncing between fear and excitement, anxiety and hope, you're broadcasting an incoherent signal that creates chaotic results. But when you maintain elevated emotions consistently, gratitude, joy, and peace, regardless of circumstances, you broadcast a coherent signal that creates stable, abundant results. Practice generating emotions deliberately rather than waiting for circumstances to make you feel good. Each morning before engaging with your day, sit quietly and consciously create feelings of gratitude, abundance, and joy. Don't wait for good things to happen to feel grateful. Feel grateful now for the abundance that's on its way. Don't wait for wealth to arrive to feel joyful. Feel joyful now because you know your consciousness is creating wealth. This reverses the typical pattern where circumstances create emotions. You're now creating emotions that will create circumstances. Solomon did this naturally because his consciousness was so refined. For you, it requires discipline and practice until it becomes natural. But every time you generate an elevated emotion independent of circumstances, you're strengthening your ability to rule your inner kingdom. You're proving to yourself that you're not a victim of external conditions, but a creator of internal states. Mental discipline also means maintaining consistency in your wealth consciousness, even when external circumstances seem to contradict your vision. This is where most people fail. They practice abundance thinking when things are going well, but the moment challenges appear, they collapse back into scarcity consciousness. They let a setback convince them that their new thinking wasn't working, that they should give up, that abundance consciousness is just fantasy. But Solomon understood that external circumstances are always lagging indicators of consciousness. What you're experiencing now is the result of your past thinking. What you're thinking now is creating your future experiences. There's always a gap between consciousness shift and manifestation. If you change your thinking but quit before the manifestation appears, you never receive the results of your new consciousness. Mental discipline means maintaining your new thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, even when your current reality doesn't yet reflect them. This is faith in action. This is ruling your inner kingdom with such authority that the outer kingdom must eventually bow to match it. Solomon faced this constantly. He made decisions that took years to bear fruit. He invested in projects that required sustained effort before results appeared. But he never wavered in his vision. He never let temporary setbacks convince him that his approach was wrong. He maintained his consciousness of wisdom and prosperity through challenges, and eventually the external world caught up to his internal certainty. You must do the same. When you commit to wealth consciousness, there will be tests. Unexpected expenses will appear. Opportunities will fall through. Things will seem to get worse before they get better. These aren't signs that your new thinking isn't working. They're often the last remnants of your old consciousness manifesting, while your new consciousness is building momentum. The test is whether you'll maintain your new thinking or collapse back into old patterns. Mental discipline means you hold steady, you trust the process, you govern your thoughts with authority even when circumstances seem to argue against your vision. There's also a practice of mental discipline that involves catching and stopping negative thought spirals before they gain momentum. You know these spirals. A worry about money triggers another worry, which triggers fear, which triggers catastrophic thinking. And suddenly you're imagining losing everything and being homeless. Solomon would never have allowed such a spiral to develop. The moment the first limiting thought appeared, he would stop it, examine whether it was true or just fear, and redirect his attention to truth. You must develop this same speed of intervention. The longer you let a negative thought spiral continue, the more momentum it builds and the harder it becomes to stop. But if you catch it early, if you interrupt it at the first or second thought, you can redirect easily. This requires vigilance, constant monitoring of your mental state, but it becomes easier with practice until eventually you catch limiting thoughts almost immediately and can course correct before they create any emotional or energetic damage. Mental discipline also includes the practice of reviewing your day and your decisions with honest self-reflection. Solomon was known for his wisdom, but wisdom isn't something you achieve once and then possess forever. It's developed through constant learning, through examining your choices and their outcomes, through being honest about what worked and what didn't. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to review. What thoughts did you think consistently? What emotions did you feel most often? What decisions did you make? And from what state of consciousness did you make them? This isn't about judgment or criticism. It's about learning and refining. If you notice you spent most of the day in scarcity thinking, you now know what to focus on tomorrow. If you made a decision from fear, you can examine what truth you needed to remember that would have allowed you to choose differently. This practice of self-reflection is how you refine your ability to govern your inner kingdom more effectively each day. Solomon's mental discipline wasn't rigid or harsh. It was loving and firm, the way a wise king governs his people. He didn't berate himself for thoughts that arose. He simply redirected them with authority and grace. You must bring this same quality to your own mental discipline. When you catch a limiting thought, don't spiral into self-criticism about having the thought. That's just another form of limitation. Simply observe it without judgment, recognize it as old programming, and choose a new thought aligned with abundance. Be patient with yourself as you develop this skill. You've spent decades letting your mind run wild. It will take time to establish new patterns, but every day that you practice governing your thoughts with conscious awareness, you're building the mental discipline that will support unlimited wealth. You're becoming a sovereign ruler of your consciousness, and from that sovereignty, all external abundance flows. The ultimate goal of mental discipline isn't control for its own sake. It's freedom. When you're at the mercy of every random thought that crosses your mind, you're not free. You're a slave to unconscious programming. But when you can observe your thoughts, choose which ones to engage, direct your attention deliberately, generate your emotions consciously, and maintain your vision regardless of circumstances, you're free. Free to create whatever you desire. Free to manifest wealth without limitation. Free to live from your highest consciousness rather than your lowest programming. This is what Solomon achieved. This is what made him not just wealthy, but wise. This is the mastery that transforms kings into legends and ordinary people into extraordinary creators of their reality. Chapter 10. Your Legacy of Abundance. Living as heir to Solomon's plan. You've reached the final chapter of this journey, but in truth you're standing at the beginning of something far greater than you've yet imagined. Everything you've learned about Solomon's wisdom, about consciousness creating reality, about reprogramming your subconscious, about frequency and vibration, about building your inner temple, about dissolving fear and practicing generosity, about mental discipline and divine alignment, all of it has been preparation for this moment. The moment when you stop being someone who's trying to become wealthy and start being someone who is wealth. The moment when you cease struggling to attract abundance and start recognizing that you are abundance. The moment when you finally integrate the ultimate truth that Solomon embodied. You are not separate from prosperity. You are consciousness itself. And consciousness is the source of all creation, all wealth, all abundance that has ever existed or will ever exist. This isn't metaphor. This isn't inspiration. This is the actual truth about who and what you are. And when you live from this truth, when you embody it so completely that it becomes your natural state, wealth creation isn't something you do. It's something you are. Solomon didn't wake up each morning wondering if he would be wealthy that day. His wealth wasn't dependent on market conditions, political circumstances, or lucky breaks. His wealth was the inevitable expression of his consciousness. It flowed from who he was, not from what he did. This is the distinction that changes everything. The shift in identity that transforms your entire relationship with money and abundance. Most people identify as separate individuals trying to get wealth from an external world that might or might not cooperate. They see themselves as limited beings in a universe of scarcity, competing for resources, hoping for opportunities, praying for breakthroughs. But Solomon identified as consciousness itself, as divine intelligence in human form, as an infinite creator temporarily expressing through a finite body. From this identity, wealth wasn't something he needed to get. It was something he naturally expressed, like light naturally radiates from the sun. You must make this same shift in identity if you want to live Solomon's plan fully. You must stop seeing yourself as a person who wants money and start recognizing yourself as consciousness that creates money. You must stop believing you're separate from abundance and start knowing you are abundant. This isn't arrogance. This isn't delusion. This is the deepest truth about the nature of reality that quantum physics, ancient wisdom, and direct experience all confirm. You are not your body. You are not your thoughts. You are not your circumstances. You are the conscious awareness in which all of these appear. And that conscious awareness is connected to, is in fact made of, the same creative intelligence that manifested the entire universe from nothing. When you truly grasp this, when you feel it not just intellectually but in every cell of your being, limitation becomes impossible, scarcity becomes absurd, struggle becomes unnecessary. You're not trying to get abundance from somewhere outside yourself. You're allowing it to flow from the infinite source that you are. This shift in identity requires that you let die the old version of yourself, the one who struggled with money, who worried about bills, who believed in limitation. This death isn't physical. It's psychological and spiritual. It's the death of a false identity that never served you, that was only a collection of limiting beliefs and conditioned responses anyway. Most people resist this death because they're so identified with their limitations that they think losing those limitations means losing themselves. But the opposite is true. When you release the limited identity, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. You discover who you've always been beneath the programming, beneath the conditioning, beneath the false beliefs that were installed before you could choose otherwise. And who you've always been is unlimited consciousness, infinite potential, creative power beyond measure. Living as the heir to Solomon's plan means you wake up each day knowing you are the source of your abundance. You don't check your bank account to determine how you should feel. Your feelings generate your bank account. You don't wait for opportunities to appear. Your consciousness creates opportunities. You don't hope for wealth. You embody wealth so completely that it must manifest in your experience, because consciousness always creates reality to match itself. This way of living feels foreign at first, because you've been programmed to believe the opposite, that external circumstances create internal experiences. But every teaching in this book has been pointing you toward the truth. Internal consciousness creates external circumstances, not the other way around. Solomon lived from this truth effortlessly. You must practice it consciously until it becomes effortless for you as well. The practice of living as abundance rather than seeking abundance changes everything about your daily experience. When you're seeking, you're in a state of lack, constantly aware of what you don't have, focused on the distance between where you are and where you want to be. This state of seeking is actually preventing you from receiving, because you're broadcasting the frequency of not having, and the universe gives you more experiences of not having. But when you've shifted your identity to consciousness of abundance, you're no longer seeking. You're expressing. You're allowing. You're receiving what's naturally yours because you've aligned with your true nature. Solomon never sought wealth. He expressed it. It poured out of him as naturally as water flows from a spring because his consciousness was aligned with infinite source. Here's how you practice this shift in your daily life. Instead of thinking, I need money to pay this bill, think and feel, money flows to me easily, and I direct it where it's needed. Instead of, I hope this opportunity works out, think and feel, I create opportunities, and I recognize the ones aligned with my highest good. Instead of, I wish I could afford that, think and feel, I am creating the wealth to have everything that serves my joy and purpose. Notice how different these thoughts feel. The first set comes from seeking, from lack, from limitation. The second set comes from being, from abundance, from power. The first set makes you feel small, worried, dependent. The second set makes you feel expansive, confident, sovereign. The energy is completely different, and energy is what creates results. You're not lying or pretending. You're aligning your thoughts with the truth of who you are, rather than with the illusion of limitation. Living as the heir to Solomon's plan also means you take responsibility for everything in your financial life. Not responsibility as blame or guilt, but responsibility as power. When you're seeking wealth from external sources, you're giving your power away to circumstances, to the economy, to your employer, to luck. But when you recognize that you are the creator of your wealth through your consciousness, you take your power back. If you're not experiencing the abundance you desire, you don't blame external conditions. You examine your consciousness. What beliefs am I holding? What frequency am I broadcasting? What identity am I embodying? This isn't about self-criticism. It's about empowerment. When you're the creator, you can change the creation. When you're the victim, you're helpless. Solomon was never a victim of circumstances. He was always the creator of his experience through his consciousness. And even when challenges arose, he knew he had the power to navigate them through wisdom and alignment. Your legacy of abundance isn't just about accumulating wealth for yourself. Solomon's wealth blessed his entire kingdom. His prosperity created jobs, supported the poor, built magnificent structures, advanced knowledge and culture. When you create wealth from elevated consciousness, from alignment with divine source, your abundance naturally blesses others. You're not hoarding from scarcity. You're overflowing from abundance. You're not taking from others. You're creating from consciousness. And consciousness is infinite, so your wealth doesn't diminish anyone else's possibility for wealth. In fact, when you operate from abundance consciousness, you actually help others access their own abundance by showing them what's possible and sharing the frequency of prosperity. This is true legacy. Not just money in a bank account, but a consciousness of abundance that ripples out and affects everyone you encounter. Think about what you want your legacy to be. Not just how much money you'll leave behind, but what consciousness you'll embody, what impact you'll make, what transformation you'll create in the world through your wealth. Solomon's legacy has lasted thousands of years, not because of the gold he accumulated, but because of the wisdom he embodied and shared. His consciousness, his understanding, his alignment with divine truth continues to teach and inspire millennia after his physical death. Your wealth, when created from elevated consciousness, will have impact far beyond your lifetime. The businesses you build might employ thousands. The causes you support might transform communities. The example you set might inspire generations. This is abundance worth creating, abundance that means something, abundance that serves life itself. To live this legacy daily, you must maintain the practices you've learned throughout this book. Your consciousness of abundance isn't something you achieve once and then forget about. It's cultivated daily through meditation, through conscious thought management, through emotional elevation, through generous giving, through alignment with infinite source. Solomon maintained practices that kept him connected to divine wisdom throughout his life. He didn't coast on past achievements. He remained vigilant, devoted, committed to maintaining the consciousness that created his prosperity. You must bring this same devotion to your inner work. Each morning, spend time aligning yourself with abundance consciousness. Generate feelings of gratitude, wealth, and joy before engaging with your external day. Throughout your day, catch limiting thoughts and replace them with empowering ones. Each evening, reflect on your consciousness and recommit to abundance for tomorrow. This daily practice is what maintains the frequency that creates wealth. As you continue this journey beyond this book, you'll face moments of doubt. Your old programming will occasionally resurface. Circumstances will sometimes challenge your new beliefs. This is normal. This is part of the process. When these moments come, and they will, remember Solomon. Remember that his wisdom wasn't instant or effortless. It was cultivated through constant alignment, through daily practice, through unwavering commitment to truth, even when lies seemed more convincing. In your moments of doubt, return to the fundamental truths. You are consciousness. Consciousness creates reality. Your state of being determines what you attract and create. Abundance is your natural state when you're not blocking it with limiting beliefs. You are connected to infinite source. Wealth is the natural expression of your aligned consciousness. These truths don't change based on temporary circumstances or momentary feelings. They remain true whether you believe them or not. But believing them and living from them is what allows you to experience their truth in your life. You're also going to experience success as you apply these principles. Moments when money flows unexpectedly, opportunities appear seemingly from nowhere. Abundance manifests in ways that surprise and delight you. When these moments come, receive them fully and let them strengthen your faith in your consciousness's creative power. But don't make the mistake of thinking the manifestation was the point. The manifestation is confirmation that your consciousness has shifted, but the real prize is the consciousness itself. Solomon's wisdom was more valuable than his gold, because wisdom created the gold and could create it again if it ever disappeared. Your abundance consciousness is more valuable than any amount of money, because that consciousness will continue creating money throughout your lifetime. Celebrate the manifestations, but remain devoted to the consciousness that produces them. There will also be moments of plateau, times when you've been practicing everything you've learned, but external results seem stalled. These plateaus test your faith and your commitment. Remember that consciousness shift and manifestation don't always happen simultaneously. Sometimes there's a lag, a gestation period where enormous transformation is happening beneath the surface before anything becomes visible. Solomon built his temple over 7 years. During that time, there were probably moments when it seemed the work would never be complete, when the vision seemed impossibly far from reality. But he trusted the process, maintained his consciousness, and eventually the magnificent structure stood complete. Your wealth creation might have similar gestation periods. Don't let temporary lack of visible results convince you that your consciousness shift isn't working. Stay committed. Stay aligned. Trust that the universe is orchestrating circumstances in ways you can't see yet, preparing you and your life to receive the abundance you're creating. Living as the heir to Solomon's plan means you become a lighthouse for others still lost in scarcity consciousness. Your presence, your peace around money, your generous nature, your consistent prosperity will raise questions in others. Some will ask how you've created such abundance. Share freely what you've learned. Don't hoard this wisdom like it's a secret that gives you advantage. The more people who operate from abundance consciousness, the better for everyone, because consciousness is collective. When you help others shift from scarcity to abundance, you're actually strengthening the field of abundance consciousness that we all draw from. Solomon shared his wisdom freely with anyone who sought it, and his generosity of spirit multiplied the impact of his reign far beyond what hoarding wisdom could have achieved. But also recognize that not everyone is ready to hear these truths. Some people are so identified with their limitations, so committed to their victim story, so invested in believing life is happening to them rather than through them, that they'll reject respect everything you share. Don't take this personally. Don't make it your mission to convince or convert anyone. Simply live your truth, embody your abundance, and let your results speak for themselves. The people who are ready will find you. The consciousness that's prepared to shift will recognize itself in your teaching. Solomon didn't chase after people to force wisdom upon them. He remained available, and those who were ready made the journey to receive his teaching. Do the same. Be a resource, not a missionary. As you move forward from this moment, understand that you're not graduating from this work. You're initiating into a lifelong practice of consciousness cultivation. Wealth creation from aligned consciousness isn't a destination you reach. It's a way of living you commit to. Solomon didn't stop growing, learning, or deepening his wisdom when he became wealthy. His wealth gave him the freedom and resources to dive even deeper into understanding, to explore consciousness at greater depths, to express divine intelligence at higher levels. Your wealth will do the same for you if you allow it. Money isn't the end goal. Consciousness is. Wealth is simply a byproduct of elevated consciousness, a tool that allows you to express more of who you are and serve more of what you're here to create. The ultimate realization of Solomon's plan is this: you are not receiving something you lacked. You're reclaiming something you always were. Abundance is your nature. Prosperity is your birthright. Wealth is your natural state when you're not obscuring it with limiting beliefs and scarcity programming. Solomon didn't become something other than what he was. He removed the obstacles that prevented his true nature from shining through. He dissolved the false beliefs that made abundance seem distant or difficult. He aligned with what was always true about him, and that alignment made wealth inevitable. You're doing the same thing. Every limiting belief you dissolve, every fear you release, every practice you commit to, every moment of alignment you maintain, you're not building something new. You're uncovering what was always there. You're remembering what you forgot. You're reclaiming your identity as consciousness itself, infinite and abundant by nature. This is your heritage. This is your legacy. This is who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning and false belief. You are the heir to Solomon's plan, not because you're special or chosen, but because you're consciousness, and consciousness is the creator of all wealth. Solomon discovered this truth and lived it fully. Now you've discovered it. The question is, will you live it? Will you commit to the daily practice of maintaining abundance consciousness? Will you choose elevated emotions over reactive fears? Will you generate wealth from within, rather than seeking it from without? Will you embody prosperity so completely that it becomes your automatic state? Will you live as the infinite creator you truly are, rather than as the limited being you were taught to believe yourself to be? This is the invitation. This is the choice. This is the moment when everything changes. Solomon's plan is no longer ancient wisdom. It's your current reality. Welcome to your inheritance. Welcome to your abundance. Welcome to the consciousness that creates worlds, and the wealth that naturally flows from that consciousness. Your journey as the heir has just begun, and the future you're about to create from this new identity will exceed anything you've yet imagined. This is your legacy. Claim it. Embody it. Live it fully, starting now.